pressure continues to be normal.
Alright, the chamber pressure looks good.
Doubling up. Roger roll, Atlantic.
Water towers can fly!
Yes! Echo Delta nominal.
Flight down speed off. Bring in, speed off. Off.
Yikes. You bet. Concur. We don't need any more of these.
All right, folks, you know the drill. We have a live stream with some commentary on it this morning, coming at you live from Starbase down in Texas. John Galloway for NASASpaceflight here, ready to run my mouth while y'all watch Booster 7 roll out. You can see we've been standing by waiting for the booster to actually get onto the highway. The constable, I think that says constable there, doesn't it? Yeah,
does.
Anyways, we got the constable vehicle, the sheriff vehicle there blocking the road. The booster is actually entering onto the highway, and so we are starting the live stream now. Let's see if we can't get some other people on the stream here, because it's not going to be just me talking. But before that, give me some 5x5s in chat. Let me know if you can hear me, and let me know if you can see Booster 7 rolling out onto Highway 4 down there at Boca Chica. With me in the studio today, we should have, I'm going to guess, Mr. Chris Bergen, managing editor for NASASpaceflight. You there?
I do, and I'm getting named first. I feel privileged. Thank you, Daz. Yes, very exciting day, as always.
Your last name starts with a B. You're right there at the top of the list.
Oh, I thought it was because I was more important. Never mind.
You ready for this thing to roll out?
Oh, yes, very much so. We've been waiting for this one to roll for a while now because it was a bit shy first time round, but now it's on the road, so it's happening.
It is. And then also back in the studio this morning, we should have Mr. Chris Gebhardt, assistant managing editor for NASASpaceflight. Chris G, we got you on?
You do indeed. Good morning, Das. Good morning, Chris.
All right. And out in the field today, of course, we've got both Mary, Boca Chica gal, and we also have Nick and Sweeney. Nick moving his camera here, it looks like, as the booster rolls onto the highway. But massive thanks to both of them, our full-time Starbase photographers, videographers, Starbase documentarians. I'm not exactly sure which way to say that, but both Mary and Nick are out there today to share some other views with you. But without further ado, it looks like the booster has officially moved on to Highway 4, and so we are going to see this thing roll all the way out. Hey, also a new thing here. We've got a NASA spaceflight personnel assisting with the stream who has not helped run a stream before. We've got Mr. Patrick here with us, clicking some buttons to choose which cameras y'all see. I think we might have Patrick on comms. Patrick, do we? We might not. All right. Well, the cameras keep changing, so that shows that he's here doing his job. But it doesn't look like I've got him on comms right now. So, in any event,
Sorry.
Oh, there you go.
Had myself muted.
Oh, there you go. All right. Well, Patrick, pressing some buttons here for the first time today. Thank you so much for helping us share this with the world.
My pleasure.
Excellent. So again, folks, if you're just joining us, what you see here is Booster 7. It's before dawn out there at Starbase, but it is officially on Highway 4. We've got cones out. We've got a disco party flashing red and blue there, and we have Nick zooming in on his camera, it looks like. But we are ready to see Booster 7 roll all the way out to the launch site for its round of testing. Chris and Chris, what's going to happen to this thing? Who wants to take a guess?
Actually, the first questions we've got are the main questions I think we can answer straight away. From Sahalas and Crypto Phoenix, both asking, will this booster come back for engines, and does it have engines? I can answer both of those straight away by saying it does not have engines at this moment in time. So it's going to roll out, it's going to be cryo-tested probably, but it's going to go on that test stand likely, and then they'll roll it back, they'll have its engines installed, and we've seen yesterday in the latest daily video, Nick got some fantastic photographs and pictures of the Raptor 2s arriving at Starbase. They've arrived from McGregor. We didn't know how many Raptor 2s had arrived yet. We didn't think any had, but now it's confirmed. We've seen a group of Raptor 2s arrive at Starbase, and those were the Raptors which will be installed on this booster when it returned to the launch to the production site after testing at the launch site.
Excellent. What sort of time frame do you think we're looking at here? Is this thing, it gets out there today and then like, I don't know, tomorrow we see some tests, next week a static fire? You think we're months away here? Like, what do you think they're going to do in terms of timing?
2 weeks, and I'm not using the Elon joke there. I really do think they'll do it in 2 weeks. I think they'll put it onto that test stand. They'll do the thrust ram checks with the 33 engines, which are going to be eventually installed onto the booster itself. I think they'll do probably a cryo test, maybe. Or they may just roll it back at that point, because a lot of the testing they need to do with the engines installed. So I think there's a good possibility we may see one proof test just when it's out there. And I think we might see one chopstick test because it's got no engines on. So if something goes wrong with the booster lift, then it's not too bad, because it's not brilliant, but it's not too bad. It's rather than banging it on 33 engines, it's got no engines on it, so it's okay. And then when they're happy, they'll bring it back to the production site and install the engines in the high bay. So I think, especially with Elon, I think he wants to be in a state of readiness in preparation for a good result from the FAA. I think there's always that likelihood of when they delay a month on month, it's not going to be something where it could be for several months. I think it might be coming to the end of the process now. So it could be a case of Elon thinking, let's get Booster 7 and Ship 24 into a stance that when the FAA passes their approval, that we're in a position we can launch these duo on that orbital launch attempt. So I think that's where they are with this. I'm going to put a bet now into chat. You can quote me on this. 2 weeks back at the production site for Raptor install.
Well, I'm sure we'll hold you to that, Chris. In 2 weeks,
they absolutely will. There'll be people screenshotting everything, recording it.
Well, I love this angle too, because you can really tell. Just before I have something with a question, but I love this view because you can see how quickly it moves. In relation to the background here, right? As we see this massive booster heading out to the launch pad, it does move faster than you think it might sometimes. But Chris, I do have a follow-up question to that, because we talk about the booster coming back to the production site for Raptor install. Why can't they do Raptor install out at the pad?
I don't think there's any reason why they can't. I think for the sake of the engines and their, let's say, avoidance of dust and weather conditions and all that business, I think it's just better to install them in the high bay, as they have done with the previous installs. So I think swapping out an engine's okay, swapping out a few engines, but 33 engine install, I think they'd rather have that process done in the high bay. I am pausing because there's no documentation to say they must be installed in a high bay. They cannot be installed out on the launch site, but I think that's the process we're expecting, especially with this rollout without the engines. Yeah. I think...
Oh, sorry. I was just going to add, because that does kind of make sense, right? You would want to protect the engines as much as possible, and from potential contamination, like you were saying, dust, the dreaded foreign object debris that can get in to your system and wreak havoc when the propellants and everything start dumping into the engines for ignition. It would make sense to bring it back to a more sheltered and secluded area to do that on a large scale.
Chris, I can qualify that a little bit more, because they've had Booster 4 out there at the launch site for a long time with their Raptors, and we've seen how they've not got to a static fire test with Booster 4. I dare say those engines being out there in those conditions for that amount of time, exposed, has not done them any favours. They even had to paint the nozzles ahead of the presentation for Elon, just to make them look pretty, because they were starting to look a bit worn. I think they want to be in a scenario where a booster with its engine set installed is going out to the pad for testing immediately and then preparations for launch, rather than just being sat out there as some kind of storage.
I was going to say, SpaceX avoiding dust at Starbase. Have y'all seen the daily videos? They don't do a lot of dust avoidance out there. They just sort of were born in the dust.
I feel like every time I've gone, as soon as I arrive at Starbase, my car is just like, well, we'll just get dusty right now because we're going to over the week. So let's just do it all at once, you know? That is that is good. That is good. And I do see some questions rolling into chat, but a reminder here: if you do have any questions for us on the booster, on the engines, on the rollout, and the test, go ahead and tag us at NASASpaceflight, and that will allow us to see it. And I do just have to point this one out because it comes from the person's name is Clever Girl. What is a group of raptors called? A herd? Maybe a flock? We need to discuss this, but kudos to all the references in there. Love that. Love that message.
No question there from Jerome, by the way. I'll quickly butt in there, Chris. Sorry about
yes, yeah, go for it.
Who
Yeah.
asks a question I'm quite interested in myself. Is it possible that during this closure they will also roll back Booster 4?
Yeah.
You know, we don't know, but it's very possible. I think with this very early morning rollout, they're going to be out the pad at a good time, and the roadblock lasts for several hours. So I think there's a good chance that they could still then roll back Booster 4 immediately. But I think Booster 4 is in a position right now where it's not in the way of Booster 7 at the launch site. So there's a possibility that they can have both of them out there at the same time.
Look at the drone up.
Yeah.
You can see it on the left-hand side of the booster there, checking things out.
So in terms of rolling Booster 4 back, a question on this: how quickly can they reposition the SPMTs, the self-propelled modular transporters that are actually what's rolling this one out? It's not a crawler like we saw a couple weeks ago for SLS. How quickly can they reposition those? Because Booster 4 is on a stand that it can be transported on, I believe, but how quickly can they get the SPMTs moved around to get it back?
I personally couldn't give you a timeline on that, but I would say that it could be done in short order. I think we've seen the speed at which they've positioned these rollers into position, and then all they're going to do is basically have the clearance to get on the road, and they've got the clearance because the road is closed now, so that's good.
Yeah. All right, so we will see on that one. Yeah, what will happen with Booster 4 once 7 gets there? Will they bring it back today or not? We will wait and see. Yeah, and Peter, with a question here about which we kind of answered already about, is it possible to install the Raptors at the launch site without bringing it back? Possible, yes, but probably not the best thing to do in terms of contamination concerns and things.
We haven't seen like a big speed loader or anything like that, like some sort of platform underneath the orbital launch mount table, whatever we're calling it these days, with like 33 engine slots. You just put all the engines on, then you raise them all up at once, and they just chunk. We haven't seen anything like that being built, have we?
No. Although I think that would be SpaceX's dream, right?
Statement. We have not seen that. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and I do think that would absolutely be SpaceX's dream if they just had a little robot or something that could very quickly go plug and play with engines. And everything, but I think that's a good point, right? I mean, because I know why you asked the question, Daz, but I think that's a good point about, engine installation, right? It can go very quick, but it's not just like it's not like you just pop the engine in and you hear it click into place, right? And then
it's a quarter turn.
Exactly, and then it has to like drop down right into its little safety cradle so it can't accident. Yeah, so it's not as simple as just popping them in, right? You do have to put them into place and then connect and then the plumbing has to connect for the liquid oxygen, the liquid methane, all the other things that need to be connected so that you can understand the health of the engines and that the engines are talking to the vehicle and to the ground properly. So it does go quickly, as we have seen, but it's not a just pop it into place and go, as much as we would love a machine that could do that.
Yep.
Here's a good question that I like. Why does Booster 7 not have grid fins installed yet? Well, it's not launching anytime soon, and the grid fins are needed for flight. So for these sequence of ground tests, they don't need the grid fins. And as we have seen in the past, when something is not specifically needed for a certain purpose, SpaceX has the tendency to just not include that if it's not needed for the test. So the grid fins are not going to be something that affect propellant load or cryoproofing or pneumatic testing or anything along those lines that you would be doing out at the orbital launch site, and even when we look at potentially using the chopsticks for booster 4 stacking for booster 7 stacking onto the actual orbital launch mount, if that's how they go, the sort of pins that the catch arms you connect to on the booster to raise and lift it are not the grid fins. So grid fins are just not necessary.
Yeah. It's interesting because we saw the grid fins on Booster 4, but those were necessary for the Booster 4 work. You got to have the grid fins for the photo shoot. You want a full stack photo shoot out there, it needs grid fins. Also, we saw them do some what seemed to be fit checks. Remember how one of the grid fins was twisted like 45 degrees? And it looked like they might have had to do that to give clearance to the quick disconnect arm. But maybe they've got that information on how those grid fins fit with the arms and stuff, and so they did not see the need to install them here. That may also be a potential reason we would see it roll back to the high bay again. I imagine installing the grid fins way up on those lift would be easier to do at the high bay than it would be out at the launch site. So maybe that's something we might see. Maybe it'll go out, it'll do some initial tests, it'll roll back to the high bay, it'll get its engines, it'll get its grid fins, then it'll go back out again. Again, no statement from SpaceX saying that is absolutely the plan, but maybe that makes sense because we've seen them install grids right there, or grid fins right there at the entrance to the high bay, which is now sort of like the baby bay compared to the huge bay next to it, the wide bay next to it there. You can see in this shot.
Question from Nick here, by the way. Thanks for your support, first of all. With Raptor 2 beginning to arrive, is it safe to assume they've stopped melting? Or might we still see some engine-rich combustion? You know what? We've been hearing and seeing lots of testing that's going on with the Raptors at McGregor for a while now, with the Raptor 2 especially. And I think the arrival yesterday of those flight units was a very good sign that they're now getting some good engines ready for flight. So I think they will, with every rocket and new rocket engine testing, they will have some engines which will let go and fail, and that's why they test them. But I think with the arrival of those Raptors yesterday, they're certainly getting some which have passed qualification ready for flight. So I think that's a very good sign that we're seeing these Raptors arrive now at Starbase. To me, that suggests they're passed and they're qualified, and they have not melted on the test stand. So that's a very good sign. But of course, they will need lots and lots of these Raptors. And I think one of the key things from McGregor is we've seen a new factory that they've been building there, thanks to Gary Blair for NSF's overhead photographs. And that facility will be now building Raptors and testing them in situ at McGregor, rather than shipping them from Hawthorne all the way across the country to Texas, which I don't think does them much good. So I think that's something where they can build, test, and then ship them to Starbase. It brings the process down, and it allows for more and more Raptors to arrive, and that bodes well for the future.
Indeed, it does. And we're getting a few questions here too with Booster 7 going out to the pad. And a couple people are asking this, or a lot of people are asking this in chat. But basically, Booster 8 is peeking out from the high bay. Which one will fly? Elon didn't specify the number. Could it be Booster 8 instead of Booster 7? Well, that is sort of the evolving question, we might say, and the evolving answer as SpaceX has gone through this, right? Originally, they were saying it was going to be Booster 4 and Ship 20, which we absolutely know is not the case anymore. Right now, the current candidates are Booster 7 and Ship 24 for the potential first orbital flight. But again, that sort of depends on what they find in testing, how that particular test goes, but also a big part of this is as SpaceX keeps evolving. There's the section of Booster 8 that is attached to the bridge crane. That is another question that we have that I saw in the chat there. So it is attached to its load spreader and the crane there in the high bay. But another thing that we have seen is that as SpaceX continues to iterate and design on these vehicles, and the design itself keeps changing, the information you would get out of the now obsolete versions of the boosters is something you have to weigh, or something that they will weigh, in terms of, is it worth flying this particular prototype if the design has changed by X amount, right? And we can certainly see that, flying Booster 4 and Ship 20, if that were still a viable option, the design has changed so much to Booster 7 and Ship 24 that it's worth it to just skip to them. But that being said, if the environmental assessment review continues to take longer, if regulatory approval for getting licenses for these things continues to take longer, it's possible it could be Booster 8. It's possible it could be a booster after that. So right now it's sort of nebulous, but with that understanding that right now the candidates are likely Booster 7 and Ship 24.
Yeah, my answer would have been Booster 7 and Ship 24. Done. Thank you. Thanks for asking the question.
Sorry.
Well, personally, I think they've got another milestone to achieve before they even think about flying, and that is a full static fire. And that's something that's going to be incremental. I think we'll see 3, 9, and then maybe a full set. And I think when we talk about full set, I don't think they'll fire all 33 at the same time. I think they'll fire the outside Raptors, the RA boosts, as a set, and then they'll do the gimbal ones as a set and class that as a 33. So I think that's what we've got to look forward to, because we're not close to that yet. Luckily, with this new design, they'll get a lot more data rather than what they would have got from Booster 4, because Booster 4 would have been Raptor 1s and thus obsolete data compared to the Raptor 2s, and obviously the changes they've made with Booster 7. But right now, I think Booster 7 and Ship 24 got the best chance of the orbital attempt. Remember, the orbital attempt is an orbital velocity attempt. It's not something to go into space and go round and round and round the planet. They're going to expend both the booster and the ship in this test flight. And then Booster 8, Ship 25, let's say, will be the ones they'll try and catch. So it's exciting once they get that FAA approval.
Yeah, and man, that FAA approval is what we are all waiting for, aren't we?
Yep. Part of that is because 19,000 people responded to the FAA questionnaire. That kind of backfired a little bit, let's face it. Elon said, please support us by replying to the FAA, and 19,000 people did.
Yeah, because I don't think one thing that was made entirely clear, as it may have should have been in that regard, was that with these regulatory approvals, when people submit comments for them, every comment has to be read and considered. You can't just group them together and ignore them. Like, everyone has to be read, because that's part of our regulatory process. So yeah, 19,000 messages that they had to review. That takes some time. Definitely here. So here's a good question. So there are some trucks that are following the booster that appear to be transporting some things. What are the trucks taking with them? What are the things that sort of move with the SPMTs here? Because I know some of them are like trucks that monitor the state of the vehicle, because there is a slight pressure within the tanks to keep the steel rigid enough to undertake the weight of the booster as it rolls. Great tight shot here of that engine compartment, where you can see the new chines and the black covered composite overwrap pressure vessels that are still on the outside of this particular booster here as it rolls. But yeah, those trucks that follow the SPMTs contain workers. They contain some equipment to monitor the health and status of the vehicle itself, and then some extra equipment that they might need to bring with them if they have to do like maintenance on an SPMT as it's moving down the highway. That's sort of what we know are contained within those vehicles, that the follow vehicles, basically.
It's a good question. Yeah. Jelly asks, when do you think the wide bay will host its first ship booster? I think Booster 10. I am completely guessing, as you may have assumed, but I just pulled Booster 10 out of the air, because Booster 8 is in the high bay now. Booster 9 is already in sections being produced. So I think that the finishing work on the wide bay is still yet to be done, but it may be done in time for Booster 10, at least just to store some parts, because they will get to the point where they'll have too much vehicle hardware for storage. So it's something where the wide bay right now is in a position where it could be at least used for that purpose. As far as the first stacking, that's the question you want to ask. The first stacking will be dependent on when the cranes get installed. So I think that's something to look forward to. But yeah, again, Booster 8 is in there now. I think Booster 8 will be built up in short order. And then they can do the same process with Booster 7, where they moved it out and moved parts of Booster 9 in and start stacking on that one. The high bay is still fine for that.
Indeed, and speaking of heroes, we got this wide shot as we can see Booster 7 rolling down Highway 4 here. CA&P Railroad, thanks so much for the support. Doing a slight joke here on something that we did for the SLS rollout 2 weeks ago, saying they see me rolling. Oh look, shiny thing. Yes, indeed. Oh, look at the shiny thing rolling down the highway. Yes, indeed. Thank you so much, CA&P Railroad, a regular on our streams, as always. Thank you. Always good to see you. And Matt, a part-time tank watcher, also saying, nothing like a rollout before school. By the way, Das, I do have a great occupation.
Nice.
So there we go. Thank you so much, Matt. And Ken B, thank you so much for becoming a PadRat member. And thank you for checking out that membership program. Definitely. And thank you to all of thank you to everyone watching. Thank you to everyone who supports us through just watching that ad or a super chat or the membership program. Thank you so much. It's the community here that means the most to us. So thank you so much for joining us and liking and supporting what we do. We like to have fun as we watch these things roll down the road, don't we, guys?
I do. I'll take it deadly seriously. I'll tell you one thing. It'd be a question of how fast this is going. Look at the speed this is moving now. It's quite good.
Yeah, it does. They get onto those straightaways, and if there are no problems, they can go pretty quick. But they do tend to slow down when they come to turns, which we are approaching here. Actually, in the road to get that turn out toward the orbital launch site, and then it'll come right past our camera location here as well. But Chris, you mentioned a booster number for the wider bay.
Yeah, booster
however
10.
we're calling it. I have another question here from Kieran, who's asking, which booster do you think will make the first return to the launch tower attempt? And specifically, they reference 10 or 12, maybe.
Oh, heck. Well, I think Elon's plan, and of course Elon's plans are always ambitious, was for the first orbital launch, to be an expendable launch where they'll lose the booster off the coast and lose the ship near Hawaii. And that was the plan. They wanted to just test the TPS and test how the performance was, and then try and catch on the next attempt. So the next attempt would be Booster 8. Of course, I think a lot of that will depend on the accuracy of how the expended Booster 7 and Ship 24 perform, because I think they'll do some testing of their accuracy of landing. Like a bit like when the early Falcon boosters where they did water landings. They got some data there before they attempted to land it on the drone ships. So I think that's something that'll play into the decision making as far as return to the launch site, because when you lose a booster on a drone ship, that's not too bad. When you lose the booster into the tower, that will be quite bad. So I think they want to be getting some good data on this first. If you want me to be a betting man, I would go for maybe the first successful... Well, the question wasn't first successful, was it? The question was the first attempt. I think the first attempt will be Booster 9. Personally, I think they'll try 2 expendable launches, and then go for it on Booster 9. And have a process that if they're not happy with the return, they can divert and avoid destroying the launch tower.
Indeed, because protecting that launch tower is important. And go ahead, Das. What was that other view?
That quick shot from across the ship channel there. It's just over here. It's all blinking lights and the sheriff and the close-up cameras, and this is what it looks like from South Padre Island right now. So just an odd, not as shiny tower moving across the darkened landscape here before sunrise. We're about 40 minutes from sunrise here, I think.
Just about. Sunrise is 7:21 local time at Boca Chica this morning.
So I wonder if they're not going to get it all the way to the launch site before the sun even comes up here.
They might. It takes depending on if there are issues during the roll, right? It takes about 2-ish hours to get it there, correct? And obviously that depends on if they have to stop for an issue or if they can just keep going, things like that. But it's about 90 minutes to 2 hours to get it out there, right?
Yeah, but they've also done a lot of road work.
Oh, that's true.
Where they've regraded the road and they put a new foundation under the entire road. They've been working on that for months out there. So I wonder if that's not going to help increase their speed here to get up the road. We know in the past they've had to do some things like stop for a bit and then re-level it, and some guys like leaning over to the side and looking at it. And maybe with all the road work, they won't need to do that anymore.
What a wonderful segue into this question from Mark. Who's faster, the SPMT or the SLS crawler?
Oh, the SPMT.
Yeah.
Do drag races here, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, the crawler transporter 2 is 0.8 miles per hour, isn't it, I think?
With a fully loaded stack, it's under it's under a mile an hour with a top unloaded, if it's not carrying anything and just running back to the VAB. It has a blazing speed of 2 miles per hour.
Wow.
The SPMT wins, definitely. And actually, while we're on the shot, we have a question about this. Here, what is that black cover near the engine section? So if you look here, and we're going to tilt the camera up a little bit, it looks like, to look at this. So if you see, there's the silver structure here, and then as the booster sort of comes around and we tilt up here, you can see sort of off to the left-hand side, although the glare is something here that was not there when I started this, so we will see. But basically, there are 2 composite overwrap pressure vessels on the outside of the booster, and you can see we're zooming into it here. Those external pressurization tanks are covered right now with like a black plastic, and that's just to protect them from moisture and humidity and rain and dust and the elements as it is out in the elements and moving around. So we can expect to see those stay there until they need to work on them or until they put the actual coverings on them that they might for some of the testing campaigns that are coming. But that black covering there is just a covering for environmental protection on those COPV pressure vessels.
Trash bags.
Trash bags, yes, basically. They're trash bags.
No, it's a tarp. It's like a tarp that's there to protect whatever's underneath it, but it's not just trash bags taped to it.
And I've got the most important question we'll ever get in this chat, which is from Ron Smith. Important question this morning: coffee or tea?
Well, I'm
tea.
American, so coffee.
Tea, and not the iced tea nonsense that some Americans insist on.
Oh,
it's a
Chris.
hot cup of tea with milk, optional sugar, and that's how you do it.
Oh, Chris, when you're over here, I must see your reaction to Southern sweet tea.
No, it's not tea though, is it?
Well, technically it is.
I don't know about that.
We've put dirty leaves in water and hit them up a little bit, so
If it doesn't
technically tea.
if it doesn't involve a kettle, it's not real.
Well, it's a kettle until you dump it into ice. You still boil the water. Jeez, technically tea.
Cold tea shouldn't be allowed.
Shouldn't be allowed. How about iced coffee, though? I mean, iced coffee is a thing, too.
Ooh,
It is?
No.
It comes in handy on summer days when it's like, 40 C, 100 Fahrenheit outside.
Anyway, enough of this cold tea nonsense.
But that's
Lucas Accord asks, does SpaceX have any contingency in case of the commercial sector just can't keep up with Starship timeline? Could they table this technology? Starlink can't sustain this mission. I think I know where you're going with that, which is basically a question of timelines and a question of use of vehicle. With the Starlink launches, I think SpaceX find that as the most viable payload for first operational launches. In fact, they may even launch Starlinks on test launches. That's the way they're going forward with this. We've seen the nose cone section with the little slit which the Starlinks will deploy from, and the structure that was inserted, thanks to some great footage from Mary a few weeks ago. I think that is something where SpaceX can show off the capability of Starship. As far as its government contracts with the likes of HLS, I think whether or not that is delayed because of, say, SLS delays, or if there's any other reasons for that, that's not a problem because it's paid for. That's a contract. So that's a contract. They'll work to the Artemis timeline. That's not a commercial timeline. As far as other launches Starship can be involved with, I'm sure Gwen Shotwell, who is extremely capable and probably the star of SpaceX, will be finding many a customer for Starship launches. So I don't think that is any problem at all. I think first things first, they need to get this vehicle through its test process and into an operational phase. Once it's there, they will then have the decision to make how many can they launch from Starbase in Texas, how many can they launch from 39A in Florida, and when will LC-49, there we go, put my teeth back in, when will LC-49 be operational? Because that's when their capability becomes in really in an impressive fashion, because then they'll have technically up to 4 launch towers. Which will, and you then can include the oil rigs for Phoebos and Deimos.
Yeah, don't forget about them.
Yeah, I think as far as how much they can do with Starship won't be a problem. It's a question of getting past this phase. They need to get this proven technology, because right now it has not launched. All I've had is hops with the Starship prototypes.
Yeah, and the only other point that I would add to that is, because I understand where the question is coming from in terms of timelines and development, I don't think the commercial sector is going to have a problem keeping up with Starship. I think what this will actually do, if the program and the system works the way it is intended and the way they are sort of designing it in mind, is that this sort of becomes your rapid launch cadence, where it's not so much a matter of, oh, we need to book the specific rocket that is going to be built for our mission 3 years in advance so they can build it in time for when we anticipate the satellite to be ready. The model might actually be shifting more toward when the satellite is ready, there is just a rocket waiting to take it, in some regards. And I think that's going to be a very interesting part of the equation to watch. But also from the commercial side, I think Starship's price point, if it stays within the sort of realm that they've been talking about in the low millions, is going to have a huge impact as well for what the commercial market can adapt to in terms of the services that these vehicles have offered. Or can offer, not have offered. They haven't offered it yet. Yeah, can offer. Yes, that's what I meant to say.
Because that truck decided it should not try to pass the booster on the road there.
Yeah, I was just watching that. Yeah, I was thinking, who's going to win that battle?
Yeah, did you not see the road was a busy here truck? Like it was driving straight at the booster.
Like, oh shoot, there's an obstacle on the road.
Talk about shouldn't be checking your phone while you're driving. You look up and all of a sudden there's an orbital class booster in the road. Again, folks, if you're just joining us, this is Booster 7 down at Starbase. It is rolling out from the high bay all the way to the launch site here. No engines on it right now, but it is going out for some testing. We expect to see it hooked up to some of the GSE out there. They'll move it around, maybe not chopstick it for now, but we're going to see some testing here in the coming weeks. So the test campaign for the Starship program continues down there at Starbase. We're still answering questions as well, so if you've got questions in chat, tag us at NASASpaceflight. And the same thing with the Super Chats. Here's one from Jerwa, who says, "This is to thank my wife for telling me that my tank-watching addiction is just vertical train spotting." Vertical
it's true,
train
that.
Spotting.
Hey, that's a t-shirt idea.
It is.
Someone call Mark.
Right. And hey, one other one here from a Rough Rider show as well. It's a question, do you think they'll ever need to build Pad B at Starbase if they may focus primary launches to Florida? Good morning, everybody.
That's a good question. I really like that question, because the planning shows that they got 2 towers at Starbase. But the FAA documentation is pointing towards a low launch cadence. I think it was permission for 4, is it? 4 initially? I think they can approve for more, but I don't see the immediate need for a second tower just yet. And we've seen no indications of sections being prepared for a second tower or even the foundation work for it yet. The position is there for it in the plans, but I think now they've focused their attention on spreading out the launch cadence capability, where Florida really is coming into play now. 39A and then LC-49. The last I heard was that the NASA assessment into LC-49, which is what's happening, is going well. So that could be something to keep a very close eye on, because if they have 3 launch towers in Florida, that becomes very much their main launch center, or the capability of a launch center there. The funny thing is, the range comes into play. So Florida isn't as brilliant as Starbase for the range. So they've got some balancing act to play there, because you can't just launch every day in Florida and expect no one to be upset about it. There's plenty of other companies there want to launch as well. They need the range.
Look at that. Just look at those engine points in there for a second. Yeah. My goodness.
All the hoses are just sort of hanging down from the engine attach points. Look at that.
Yeah.
Clearly no engines, though. If anybody was arguing, oh, actually, are you sure there's no engines? Yeah, there's no engines.
Yes, no engines.
Yeah, right there.
Well, DOS, there are. They're just cloaked, and an engine cannot fire when it's cloaked.
When it's cloaked. Something
Something
tachyons, I don't know. Anyways.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add to that conversation about the towers, or about the launch site there is just, I think this is coming down to regulatory approval. Like, we kind of saw that part of it cease as the larger one came into focus. So I'm wondering if plans for a different launch site might step up, right? If we might see progress being made toward a second orbital launch site at Starbase after this environmental impact survey is completed. And if they sign off on it, of course, that's the big question. Exactly what will the answer to that environmental survey be? But I'm curious if that is also playing a part in why we haven't seen progress on the second tower here.
Yeah. And look at this, by the way. We're starting to get those that sunrise lighting up the clouds there in the distance over the Gulf of Mexico. And so the booster is going to be rolling into the rising sun here. Still about 30 minutes away from the sun coming up. But this may be a treat this morning out here at Starbase. Look at this.
And you can also see the gigantic work light that is being towed by those trucks too. So in addition to equipment, add lighting to what those trucks are towing.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can see one towing that cart and one towing that light. That is awesome. Kind of talked about that stuff. So here's an interesting question that was asking, do you all think, when do you all think the Raptors are going to get quick disconnects? That way, if one burns up on launch, they can swap it out in orbit. That's an interesting question. I'm not sure how you necessarily. I mean, the question I would have there for a quick disconnect, in that regard, for an operational engine, is how you confirm the routine safety of it. If it's not a hard connection into the vehicle, but one that could in an automated fashion pop an engine out, I'd be very curious on the safety analysis on that. And definitely swap it out in orbit. We don't have that capability yet. I see where you're going with that in terms of the future, but just to be very clear, we don't have that capability right now to like swap out an engine, to launch another engine and then swap it out in orbit. It would also be cheaper just to bring it back. To be in all honesty, with the system that we're talking about, it would probably just be cheaper to bring it back and replace the engine that way. But good question. I like that. And another good question here from Nifty is asking, what are the differences between Booster 4 and Booster 7 in terms of plumbing and an increase in propellant? So there is no increase in propellant. The tanks for Booster 7 were not stretched, so they are the same as they were for Booster 4. Now, Elon has talked a little bit about potentially well, and there's its destination in the background. That's good. I like that. But no, in terms of, Elon has talked about potentially stretching the tanks of the booster at one point, because stretching instead of changing the diameter is easier. but not without complication. But no, Booster 7 does not have any stretch tanks, so same propellant. The plumbing has definitely changed, though, because the big difference here in terms of the internal workings of the booster is that Booster 4 was designed for 24 Raptor engines and designed for the Raptor 1 engine, and then Booster 7 was designed for 33 Raptor 2 engines. So yes, a lot of the internal plumbing has changed and altered here with the booster. And of course, as we've seen as it came out today, it also sports chines on this one. So that is a difference from Booster 4. And the other major visual difference right now is that Booster 7 does not have its grid fins installed because they are not open. They're open. They are not needed for the sequence of testing that it is going to the pad to perform. That was in good question there. Thank you very much. And here's another good question from Lucas. Will Starship have an issue of working out its own rapid capabilities? The more you launch, the less you have to launch for future missions. It's an interesting question. I originally read this as you asking, will Starship have to work through some issues to get to its rapid reuse capabilities that they are talking about? To which point the answer is yes. We should not be expecting the first flights of the boosters and these ships to result in these 1 hour and 3 hour turnarounds that Elon has talked about as the target for the two systems, booster and ship respectively. On that will definitely take time to come to fruition. And of course, historically, turnaround times for reusable vehicles have not quite met reality. The reality has not quite met the expectation, and we can even look at that with the Falcon 9. Falcon 9 had a target of being reused within 24 hours, and that has not happened, and we have no indication that SpaceX is even trying to attain that at this point. The minimum they have achieved is about 27 days for the booster, for one booster between flights. So I think we'll definitely see them increase that cadence, but yeah, getting to that rapid reuse capability is definitely something that's going to take time, that they're going to have to work out and work through some things. Yeah, good question. So here's another good question from Mad at Gaming, who is asking, regarding static fire of the Super Heavy booster, does the current license allow for a 33 engine static fire? I don't think I've ever seen the licenses for the static fires dictate a maximum number of engines. Does anyone have a memory of the licenses actually specifying engine number?
No.
Yeah. So I think that's the easy answer, is the license itself just grants permission for the static fire. Now, what SpaceX chooses to do will be very interesting, and this is a gorgeous image of sunrise. Look at that on the horizon. But this will be interesting in terms of what SpaceX chooses to do, because one thing I would not expect to see happen is them to just go for a 33 engine ignition on the very first try. I would very much think that we would see a sort of staged approach to this, because remember, while the Raptor 2s have been fired in their test stands at McGregor as part of the development and acceptance testing process for the engines, they have not fired clusters of these before, because you have to put them into ships in order to do that type of testing. So they haven't ignited 33 at the same time out at McGregor. So not having all of that information, certainly you have computer models that show you what that's going to do to the vehicle and everything. But we've also seen SpaceX, even on the ships that only have 3 or 6 engines, start by firing a smaller number and then gradually increasing that number up to a full static fire. So it will be interesting to see what they choose to do there. But from a licensing perspective, we have not seen licenses that dictate number of engines. And I see so many people asking this question. I think if we don't ask it at this point, there's going to be a revolt in chat a little bit. Do we think Booster 4 is headed, or Booster 7 are headed for the can crusher?
Yes.
No hesitation.
And for those who aren't familiar, what is the can crusher that we're talking about here?
Isn't it? It's like a thrust ram situation where if you see from above it, it's like got a 33 engine points where they'll put. I think what they'll do is they'll give it under pressurization and then they'll just start prodding it, giving it the thrust rams. So it's the same thing we've seen with the ship testing before, but this is a structure designed for the redesigned 33 Raptor engine booster. So it'll sit on there. It'll go through that process. And hopefully, I think that will then validate the thrust puck and the aft section for the installation of the engines, and then they can go through to the next phase of testing, which we've seen before with Booster 4, but hopefully this time with the static fires you just mentioned.
Indeed. Oh, there's a great shot too.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Sunrise shots at Starbase are always very nice.
Yeah.
Here's a quick follow-up to something we were just talking about from Taylor, asking why do they even need a license for static fires if it's a private launch range? This is a great question, and it actually comes down to it ultimately comes down to the operation that you are performing is to fuel a rocket and ignite its engines. And by igniting those engines, you have a thrust to weight ratio greater than 1, which means if your hold down system fails, you're going up. So basically, you have to treat static fires as if the vehicle will lift off from a safety standpoint. So in that regard, even static fires require some degree of regulatory approval. Now, for Starbase, the other consideration there is the effect that has on the local population on South Padre Island, which is only 6 miles or about 10 kilometers away from the launch site. So you also have those types of considerations that go in to the licensing. And what we have seen is that the licensing allows for X number of ground tests and X number of flights. And that's sort of how they handle the licensing requirements down there at Starbase. But even though it's a private range, they still need licensing. And that actually means that the licensing is a bit different than what the licensing would be going from the Kennedy Space Center. And Starship 2 has different licensing requirements because it's a private commercial vehicle than the SLS will as a government vehicle. So that's sort of why they need it, even though it's a private launch range.
Yeah, and Chris, I'm going to make one little nitpicky comment there. You say private launch range, but it's really not a range, right?
True.
The launch pad is, 150 yards from the public road. There's the beach that's a few hundred meters away, the public beach that's open. So it's not like Cape Canaveral where they have, a mile in each direction, especially with the southern pads, right, where they're down on the Space Force Station. That I sort of call a range, right? They have a lot of extra room around it. I know that's not the technical definition, but here it is really a site that is surrounded by publicly accessible areas. You know what I mean?
Yeah, indeed, and I think that's a good point because there are two ways to sort of think of the range, right? It's the land area, indeed, and then it's also the people who are in charge of making sure like the area is clear that needs to be clear, the tracking equipment and things like that.
Yeah, I know it's not.
So a private launch site is probably a better way to put it than range. Yeah, because of what the Cape actually does and what the Air Force supports versus here. Yeah, good point.
Like I know that's not like the technical definition. Like when we say the Eastern Range, it's not just like, the boundary end's right here. That's the end. There's a lot of other assets involved in that sort of thing. But here it is. The public roadway is literally 100 yards away from the launch mount.
Indeed. And this is a quick question. It is related to SpaceX and their ongoing connection to NASA and everything. It's not specifically Starship, but I do want to hit this really quick. Because someone is asking, and it's a really good question, with the move away from using Soyuz for the U.S. segment crew, which includes the U.S., Canada, Europe, and Japan on the station, do you think it's a mistake for SpaceX to stop producing more Dragon capsules and just use the ones they currently have in rotation? No. Because the Dragon fleet was always going to end up being about fleet management. And they can, with Endeavor, Resilience, Endurance, and the new one, which I know got a name. What was the name of the new one? I know they named it last week.
Oh my God, I've forgotten as well.
Was it Freedom?
Yes, it was.
Freedom, yes, Freedom is what they named it. So yeah, with a capsule fleet of 4, I will simply leave this as my answer. At no point in the history of the shuttle program did NASA ever have more than 4 operational orbiters at the same time, and they managed just fine. So this is just about fleet management of your capsules, and you're going to need 1 for a long duration flight a year. Right now they need 2 because they're the only ones doing them, but ideally you'll end up needing 1 for 1 long duration flight a year, and Starliner will do the other one to the ISS. And that leaves you 3 to do your other private missions, to have in rotation, getting ready for another one. So this just becomes about capsule fleet management. But no, 4 is okay. I don't see that's an issue. Yeah.
Look at it going.
Look at it. I mean, that's one where it's like, yeah, you do see me rolling on that one, don't you?
Wow.
Yep.
That is the fastest I've seen a booster roll. I mean, Tracy, we've not seen many boosters roll, but that is speed.
That really is. Look at that.
That's a cool shot too, with the sun reflecting on it from that angle. Or the
Yeah.
sunrise. The sun's not quite up yet. We're like 18 minutes away, 16 minutes away, it looks like.
And you can so clearly see the new China editions. You can see the black coverings over the COPVs. That's just a gorgeous shot.
Quick thanks to Daniel B for upgrading his membership to Launch Director. That is some support, very much appreciated, because we are improving our membership areas as we possibly can, and that includes lots of new additions and more additions to come. So Daniel is not only upgrading for the benefits he's getting and the support he's providing right now, but he'll have more benefits to come. Surprises in the near future.
And I love this comment from Zach right now in chat going like, "You're messing with us. It's sped up footage, LOL. We assure you it's not." It's actually moving that fast. But yes, Daniel, thank you for becoming a launch director. Very, very much appreciated. Stefan also, what's that moving tower for? Yeah, the moving tower is quite important today, isn't it? There as Booster 7 heads on out to its launch site for testing. Bob Brown, thank you so much for the support. No message, just support. Thank you. Liz saying, I hope the environmental assessment passes sometime soon. I'm looking forward to the first orbital flight. I think that's a statement all of us can agree with on that one. On that one, yeah. Hopefully April 25th is the actual day that we get it on that one. So definitely. And here's another question, and it's a good question. If Starship is as cheap as envisioned, will it change the timescale and the ambitions of Artemis?
Ooh.
This is this is a good question, and I think there's 2 initial answers to that, which are both valid. The first one is not immediately, and then the second one is, but yeah, the further into Starship operation, if Starship ends up meeting the flight rate and the timescales and the price point that is envisioned, it becomes a harder question for the U.S. Congress to get around. But I don't envision a scenario here, because of the political support behind SLS, that Starship would change this anytime soon.
Look at we got to see.
Look at that picture, or that image. My goodness.
Really quickly, you want to see it move? Look at this camera. I mean, that thing is hauling the mail.
It needs little cartoon sound effects like.
I want some clip clops like coconuts.
Oh yes, that would have been a better one. Yes.
Like behind the camera, there's like a giant wooden badger or something.
Badger. Oh, that's good. That is good.
Yeah, again, folks, this is Booster 7 rolling out to the launch site. We have been waiting for this for a while, but of course, Booster 7 is the one that is fitted out to run Raptor 2s. And Elon saying that they were ready to start using Raptor 2s as their target for the orbital flight, as opposed to the older Raptors. And remember, Booster 4 that was already out there did the full stack, ship 20. That was not compatible with the Raptor 2s. So when we got that when we got that tweet from Elon, that sort of led us to believe that we were going to see this rollout. We actually just yesterday saw some Raptors arriving there. I think the first potentially flight-ready Raptor 2s out there. So Starbase continuing to move forward here, but we're about to have 2 boosters out there at the pad. You can see off in the distance Booster 4 and Booster 7. You'll be able to tell them apart from a distance. Booster 4 still has the grid fins, so you can actually see those grid fins sticking off the side of the top of Booster 4. And then Booster 7 does not have the grid fins installed yet. So until SpaceX makes a liar of me and puts grid fins on Booster 7 one night when we're not looking, you can tell the difference between the two that way, grid fins or not.
And speaking of Raptor 2s, I've pinned the latest video into the top of chat. I recommend, while watching this rollout, you watch that video as well, because Nick has got many a photograph and footage of the Raptor 2s that arrived at Starbase yesterday. And if you saw behind the scenes, he was stood on top of his car in gale force winds, capturing those pictures. So the least you can do is watch the video, I say. The least you can do. And drop a like in it. I don't care. I'm going to turn to a YouTuber now and say, drop a like, subscribe, notifications. No, seriously, watch that video. It's great footage of the Raptor 2s.
Yeah, it really is.
Speaking
Nick
of which,
on top of his car, like he's standing on the roof of his car to get the Raptor footage.
And the car was at an angle on the bank. I was thinking, this is crazy. One gust of wind and he's off his car. But there's a relevant question, Raptor 2s here from Daff80, who asks, can Booster 7 use Raptor 2s? Yes, and it is. And do you think the Raptor 2s will have the same problems when they boost the Starship, with the booster Starship like Raptor 1? Well, the same problems. It means what you mean by same problems. I think Raptor 1 was doing quite well. It was just not the performance that Elon wants. And also, he wants to reduce the price of cost unit, which he's going to do Raptor 2 because it's a smaller engine and it's more streamlined, shall we say. I think as far as problems with the engines, I think that's the whole thing about rocket science, is that they're going to do a lot of testing. They're going to have problems. They're going to fix the problems. And if there's any company out there which is adept to succeeding when it comes to getting over problems, it's SpaceX. They fly, test, fail, fix, fly again. That's what they do. And they've done it with the Falcon 9 during landings. They've done it with other elements of their program where they've had a problem. Like, remember the Dragon, the first Dragon which blew up on a test stand? That was something that could have set any other company back years. SpaceX got around it. They found a problem and fixed it. You're going to find these problems during testing. The trick is to get to a position where you can get past the problems and get into an operational phase. And I think their plan with Raptor 2 will work out for them. And I think they're going to evolve it again after that as well. So it's all about testing and evolution.
And the cool thing is we get to see all that here at Starbase.
Oh, yes. Well, I mean, that's the other thing we're talking about, launch sites and what have you. Elon has said, at the very least, that Starbase will be R&D. Now, R&D might not sound as glamorous as HLS launches from 39A, but actually, to me, that has a big appeal as it is, because we will see the first evolutions of what they're going to take forward with Starship. Even if you take into the future where, say, Booster and Starship are launching on Starlink launches already and they're happy with the Raptor 2s, they're going to keep wanting to press forward with these vehicles. We've got a lot more to see yet. We're going to see a Starship with a crew compartment at some point. And that'll probably be the first we'll see is at Starbase, because that's their R&D. They're going to do a lot of testing out there. And they'll do test launches. We're not going to be watching just static fires. They're going to do launches. Just waiting for the FAA approval for that. As far as the flagship launches, such as the HLS mission to the moon, that'll be 39A. We know that. That's going to be nailed on. But there'll be a lot of new technology and new evolutions and future vehicles that will be tested at Starbase that we'll get to watch via our cameras. It's something that still excites me, even if they do spread the launches over several launch sites, such as Starbase, 39A, LC-49.
Still can't get over how fast this thing goes across the screen when it's rolling.
How much of a distance is it from the production site to the launch site on Highway 4?
1.7 miles.
Yeah, and it's
gonna
3
talk-
miles from. Well, it's 3 miles from the VAB to the 39A on the crawlerway, and that's 0.8 miles per hour with the crawler transport, and that takes 8 hours or something. So if this is going to be 1.8 miles or whatever it is, and it's going to be there within the hour, I think maybe. When did it start to roll out?
It should be there within the next few minutes.
Yeah.
At this point, yeah, no, it took 11 hours to go the 4.3 miles with SLS from the VAB to the pad B, going at like 0.8 miles per hour. Now, and then the booster can come out a lot quicker. Now, a couple things to caveat with that is that SLS is a lot heavier. And fully assembled, and they don't transport the Starships fully assembled out to the pad. So that does help them go faster in some ways. Also, the SPMTs are designed to go faster than the crawlers, so that helps too. But the crawlers also have to navigate different terrain than the SPMTs do in terms of climbing grades and things like that. So it's all interesting and all fascinating, the different ways that you can move things like this.
Wow, look at this.
Yeah, you can see it. They're about to be eclipsed by Hopper.
Yeah.
The other thing, Chris, the SPMTs don't carry the launch pad with them.
Exactly.
They
That's sort of the other
mount,
thing.
Yeah, a transport mount, but they don't carry the entire tower. The tower's already out there, and they're just carrying the booster. Look at this.
Can you imagine the size of what SpaceX would need if they needed to transport the fully stacked Starship and the orbital launch mount and catch tower out to the pad each time? Like, that's sort of what SLS has to do every time.
Rest in peace, Highway 4.
Oh gosh, yes. If
you know, that's the other thing, Chris.
Chris,
that's the other thing, isn't it? That the crawlerway is bedrock, especially imported bedrock from, where is it? Louisiana, I think, or something like that.
It's Alabama River Rock.
Alabama,
and it comes
that's close.
And it comes specifically from Fayette, Alabama.
Nice.
Yes. Shout out to news colleagues in Huntsville, Alabama, who helped me with that. But yes, that is where the crawlerway rocks come from. And of course, the other thing too here that we should mention is that the SPMTs and the crawler uses diesel, and it gets an impressive 42 feet to the gallon. It hauls that thing out, but the mass that it's carrying is different. And the crawler just when it was designed in the 60s, like, it can't be electric. It can't be any more efficient than what it was designed for in the early 60s. So it's another one of those, as you keep reusing technology, you end up with these really interesting divergences between watching how Starship does it and how they do it at Kennedy, right? Where the mass that you were trying to move at Kennedy was just too much for rail systems or road systems to handle. So you had to build a road for it with rocks.
Like a special road where part of the suspension is the road gets crushed while it moves.
Yes.
Literally, that's literally how the crawlerway works. The rocks literally break apart, and that's part of the suspension for moving the crawler out to the pad at 39 is the crushing of the rocks that absorbs some of the energy of moving that thing down the road. It's one of the craziest things.
And also, they have that water tanker, which is like a procession in front of it where they spray down the bedrock to keep the dust down before the crawler tracks go over it. It's a whole fun thing at KSC there.
Oh, there is. And you can see here, right, that you can see here clearly how it slowed down as it's approaching this turn in the roadway. You can also see that the road is newly paved. So we'll ask Mary and Nick once it goes by how the road looks. After that, but and this is sort of like so Das, like this is sort of the point where, like, we're kind of expecting the booster at some point to stop for Hopper to check its papers, make sure it's supposed to be there, that it's got the right security clearance and everything, right?
Chris, that's my joke.
Oh, sorry.
Still a joke. I'm gonna do a tweet. They'll go, you just did that tweet because Chris G said it on the stream.
Nice. I continually cannot get over how fast this thing is moving. Like, look at it coming around the corner here. I feel.
Oh, go ahead, Das. Yeah.
like the road, all the road work that they did redoing the road has made this rollout go more smoothly than we've seen in the past.
Yes.
It definitely has gone faster because it was just starting to move about an hour ago.
Yeah.
And we're already here, and in the past this has taken between 90 minutes to 2 hours to get it out to the pad. So this has really gone far smoother for them today too. And you can see, I wanted to point out on the right side of the vehicle as it sort of swings around, you see that gray box that sort of pops out and it has a cord hanging down from it. So that's the quick disconnect that that when it's on the orbital launch mount, the quick disconnect arm on the bottom mount, that's the one that arm reaches out and grabs onto to fuel the vehicle and provide, data and communication lines as well. So what you see here right now is basically that it's data and electrical and some pressure lines that are helping to monitor the health of the vehicle, maintain the pressure that's in the tanks and things like that as they are rolling out to the pad. So just wanted to point out what that big cable was that's hanging from the side of the vehicle.
I think Patrick's muted here.
He said yes.
Yeah, it looks like we had an OBS crash, and he should be working to recover it, I think.
Back on YouTube.
Yeah. All right. We should be back. We had a little bit of a hiccup there. Too many white trucks in the shot, I think.
Yeah. What is it with Texas and white trucks?
It's hot. No,
it's hot. Yeah,
you
it's
know,
hot.
white truck because it's so hot.
My car is gray, and man, it struggles in Texas. Yeah.
Yep. Hey, chat, if you could hear us, tell people to F5. They may need to F5. Type that into chat because some people may not get the full quality stream back. Had a little bit of a hiccup there, but we should be back. Y'all should be hearing us again.
So I do like the one note that I got here that says, you definitely know that Chris knows too much about the shuttle when he can tell you the city where the rocks.
Yeah, well done. There you go, Chris.
That is true. Okay, so here's a that's a good shot.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Wait, I'm gonna center it here. Wait, give it a second. I'm gonna let it go off because I'm gonna pull it for the daily.
Yeah.
And as soon as it goes off, I'll get it reframed here.
And yeah, that's a great shot. I love it, Das.
Yeah.
That's
Here
a
we
tweet.
go.
Hang on, I'll do a tweet. Anyone want to guess the reference to my tweet when I do it? This is getting out of hand. No, there's two of them.
Of course. There we go. We have the whole family here now.
There we go.
Hopper, Booster 4, Booster 7, Ship 20, the tower, and the crane.
I like that. The Starship family. And the crane.
And the crane. Hey.
You can't forget the crane. No, the cranes are... I think our audience would really take us to task if we forgot the cranes. But yeah, here is a good view of it as it's and now basically it's at the entrance point right now. So the next major thing is that those SPMTs should start to turn it to bring it into the launch site. So that's another. Oh, and there they go, right on cue, turning it to bring it into the launch site. It's like they knew what we were gonna say. But I love this. You can see the wheels turning independently.
Yeah.
To move this. These SPMTs are really impressive machines for how they can navigate the impressively tight corners and really small clearance areas.
Wow.
Look at that. And of course, as massive as the booster is, you can see the weights that they still add to the bottom of the SPMTs to lower the center of mass even more to stabilize the vehicle and the platform as it rolls. Look at that.
Those are crane weights. Like, those are counterweights, ballast for cranes, and they just stack it on the front and back of the SPMTs, and that brings the center of mass of the entire system down lower. It just holds the whole thing down. So you see that happen. You know they're about to do a roll when they have a little crane over there stacking those crane weights onto the end of the SPMT. That's always a good sign for us that they're about to move something when they're moving those weights around like that.
And have you noticed how complicated some of the transport stands are getting now? Look at the plumbing and the lines that are now rigged around them versus like the bare steel that it used to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's almost like they plan to use them. More than
I
just one?
know, right? For something so interesting. I do want to take one moment to say, Mason, thank you so much for the $70 super chat. I'm just saying, so happy to see this. Booster 7, it will hopefully be the first super heavy in space. I've been watching since SN5 and I'm counting the days to the orbital flight. NSF is my go-to for all my Starship needs. Great work, guys. Keep up the awesome work. Thank you so much, Mason.
Yeah, thanks for that. And
that
by the way,
means a lot. Yeah.
that SM5 reference, that really was one of the things. We had the hopper hop. That was fantastic fun. But SM5, that was so impressive. Just the way it controlled the ascent and return, it was just so much smoother than hopper and so much more impressive as well. And then repeat on SN6. And those two successes really did advance the program towards these large, high altitude hops with the Starship prototypes. And I hope that the testing on Booster 7 allows the next procedure, which will allow them to go for an orbital launch attempt. So it's all like process, isn't it? It all is a process. But if you think about it, it's over quite a short amount of time. It sometimes feels like things are delayed and things are taking longer than normal. If you go back just 3 years, this was just basically groundwork. There was nothing there. So it really has moved on quite fast.
It really, really has, and and amazingly so. I mean, this is part of the difference, right, that we see between government programs and private programs in terms of how quickly iteration can take place, but also just the two different ways that you can seek to design a program. And also too, I just want to stop and note, they didn't even stop before going up that slight incline, and they normally this has been a very smooth rollout of Booster 4 here, because previously there's a small incline on that where the concrete begins to go up to the pad, and normally we have seen them stop there and just get ready to do that incline adjustment on the SPMTs. Keeping it slightly level there, and they didn't this time, so that's very good, very smooth so far today. Oh,
look at that!
And there we go. Hello, sun.
There's a shot. There's a shot.
Look at that. Do you know one of our cameras was able to image sunspots the other day? Are y'all aware of that?
What?
Yes, one of our cameras at sunrise was able to image discrete sunspots on the sun.
Are you kidding me?
No, I'll get you the screenshot.
Oh, please do.
Like, is the lens dirty? And then we compared it with some NASA imagery, and no, we got shots of the sunspots on the sun from one of our 24/7 cameras at Starbase.
Well, that's just insanely cool.
It was actually this camera right here. I'm going to leave it on this shot, but we zoomed it in on the sun, and the atmospheric filtering in the cloud and the horizon was able to filter it out. It acted like a filter, and we were literally able to see sunspots on the sun right as it was rising. It was the craziest thing.
Oh, that's amazing. I love it. I love things like that. I could wax ad nauseum about sunspots, but I won't because that's not the stream.
That's not the stream.
Invite Hadrian on.
Yeah, oh my gosh, yeah. If you want to know about sunspots, have us on together and we can go. Rob Collinson, thank you so much for becoming a Red Team member. Oh man, I like this. Grumpy Koala, thank you for becoming a Pad Rat member. I love the name. And now I'm just going to go through the day picturing a grumpy koala, and that's going to be nice and random. Matthew Martin, thanks so much for the support as well. Wolfram said, let it roll down the highway. Indeed, let it roll down the highway.
Can I just say, as a non-American, I think American cop cars are amazing. They really are wonderfully colourful cop vehicles.
Oh, colourful, yes.
Colourful. Oh, they really are. Ours are boring.
Das, do my eyes deceive me, or are you showing us what I think you're showing us?
I'm working on it. The clouds are a little bit much, but you can see.
Oh my gosh.
There are two discrete spots on the sun visible on this camera. I'm just playing with the exposure a little bit to try and bring them out.
Yeah, oh my gosh, yeah. And they're moving with this. Oh my gosh, we can see. Wow, that is incredible.
Nerds.
That is incredible. All right, awesome.
All right, back to Starship. Sorry.
So here's a really good question, because we were talking about Starship's future launch site at the Kennedy Space Center. right? And I actually should say future launch sites at the Kennedy Space Center, plural. So one is definitely 39A, right, inside the perimeter of 39A. So that one will be called 39A. So that's that. But the good question here is, when they build the Starship pad at Florida, will they call it 39A since 39C already exists right next to 39B? This is a great question.
Brilliant
and
question.
I know there's some history to it. Chris, take it away, because there is actually a reason why they're not going to call it 39 here.
Show the
but,
solar
yeah.
observatory again, the NSF solar observatory again. I dialed it in even better, and then Chris
Okay.
answered. Yeah.
Okay, go for it. Show the solar observatory.
There you go. Go, Chris. Sorry.
Oh, I've got to talk over you nerds looking at the sun.
We're literally staring at the sun this morning.
I tell you, let me just give a history behind 39 first of all, because there's been some convoluted history with that. With 39A, 39B, Apollo pads, they became shuttle pads. There was going to be a 39C, which was going to be further along, where LC-49 is between 39B and 39C. Then NASA decided in infinite knowledge to actually make a 39C within 39B, a small satellite launch area, which no one took because they were basically for Rocket Lab. Rocket Lab decided to go to Wallops. So the LC-39C inside LC-39B no longer exists. So what will they call the Starship pad inside 39A? It's got to be something 39A because it's inside Complex 39A. The fixed service structure for Dragon, Falcon 9s, Falcon Heavies is inside 39A. It's not 39A itself. So I don't actually have the answer to this, Chris. I think you probably expect me to have an answer to that. But I just wanted to explain that the way they named the pads was on Complex, but then they threw that out of the window with the small satellite launch complex with inside 39B.
Yes.
So all bets are off.
Yes. No, you did exactly what I was hoping you would do. Which was to give the history of it. Because, and there was even a 39D originally, and a 39 and an E. Yes, indeed, going way up north to where Playa Linda Beach is now. But when the budgets for the Apollo program began to shrink, they reduced down to just 2 pads, but they left the option open to build more. In the intervening years, basically, what Complex 39 means is it's the vehicle assembly building, processing facilities, and launch control center there that controls the launch pads of Complex 39. There is no desire to have any of the control capabilities for Starship launches or landings happening from Complex 39. When they redid the sort of Cape geography to say, a few years ago to say, here are the available sites that you can that we have available that can be built on, and you can build new things. The existing area that had originally been 39C, D, and E sort of moved to what's the next available number in the ordering sequence at the Cape, and that became 49. So because it's a different classification area, because we're not actually there, they have no desire to actually control the vast majority of Starship operations out of the Launch Control Center at Kennedy right now. It's not part of Complex 39, therefore it will not get the 39D or 39C marker, even though it's very close to them. And
can I add something as well? If you want to be the life of the party, just get your laptop out, go on Google Earth, and go along the crawlerway. Turn left towards 39B on the crawlerway, and you'll notice before you go up towards 39B, there's a little road to nowhere, which was going to be the road to 39C. So that's something to look on Google Earth. It's hilarious. It's still there. It's like a little roadblock, which is like a little branch off from 39B's crawlerway to nowhere. And that was going to be 39C.
Indeed. So there you go. That is why the Starship pads at Kennedy will have different numberings than the 39 complexes for the ones that will be built outside of Pad A. Bo, thank you so much for the support as well. And then John asking here too, any reason why the grid fins weren't installed on Booster 4 yet? And thanks for this morning's awesome coverage. The basic answer to that is they do not need the grid fins for the test campaign that they are planning to do with Booster 4, so they are not on. So if they become necessary, they'll go on. But as we see with SpaceX, if something isn't needed for a particular test series, they tend to opt to not put it on for simplicity's sake. Here's another good question. Why doesn't Elon scale down to iterate faster? Why not develop an Eagle 12 with 12 Raptors, you know, and then make the slightly larger one? So this is one of those interesting things where making it smaller to iterate doesn't necessarily work when you scale it up. The way that they're talking about. And Elon has sort of talked about that a little bit in terms of what they got out of Hopper versus why they sort of then immediately went to the larger booster tank structures that we saw with the SN series that were taking place about a year and a half to a year ago with those flights, and why we have seen them do full-scale Starship ship and booster testing as well. So yeah, sometimes going smaller and then just multiplying it to scale it up doesn't work the way is not as simple. And Elon has even said that in terms of when they're looking at what the changes to the boosters might be. When he talks about stretching the tanks of the boosters, it's easier to stretch a booster and make it longer than it is to change the diameter and the scale of it, because then literally everything you have built to test that is completely obsolete because it's too small for your actual working vehicles. So great question, but in this case, just easier to do at full scale. All right, and let's look. And I mean, thank you so much for the questions. I see so many that are still coming in. Thank you so much. Keep the questions coming. Tag us at NASASpaceflight in chat, and we will do our best to see them and get them answered. So thank you so much for that. Oh, here's a good question. Will we see the lift today? Well, Das, the crane looks ready.
Yeah.
Yep. Yesterday we saw them add that booster lifting attachment where you can see the little, it looks like a swing, right? Hanging from the crane. They picked that up with the crane yesterday, and that's what they attached to those load points up at the top of the booster. So they may be wasting no time to get the booster off the transport stand onto, we think it's going to go onto another test stand. It may not go up onto the orbital launch mount, but there is another GSE test sort of facility out there. I don't really know what to call it. But that may be where it's going first, given the placement of the crane and where the booster has stopped here. But if the winds hold, we may see what I mean. The crane is moving right now. Look,
it is. The crane is moving right now. So there's our answer.
Yeah, it's moving right now.
Oh, that works. That works.
Yeah, I looked up and I was like, oh, well, there you go. There's your answer. It's moving.
And I also hope they don't move Booster 4 back today. They might do, but I hope they don't, because at 2 p.m. Central Time, we're going to do a Rapside chat, aren't we? So we can look at 2 boosters instead of 1.
But Das and Chris, a good point of clarification. When the crane picks up the booster, they are not aiming to put it on the orbital launch mount, are they?
No. They're going to put it. Well, we don't think so.
I mean, yes, right?
Yeah. Unfortunately, there's no press release from SpaceX to the media this morning saying, "Oh yes, we're going to roll out Booster 7 and we're going to put it over here." Unfortunately, we're all guessing all the time. By the way, that looks like a face to me.
It does look
yes,
like
it does. It does look like a face. Yes.
2 eyes, empty, soulless eyes.
Yes.
Wait, what?
Or it looks like surprised, like, what? Good morning.
Oh. Wait, when I fell asleep, I was in the high bay, and now I'm out here.
Here's a good question that actually relates to the other end of the vehicle than the one that we are looking at now. Paul is asking, any thoughts on gimbal hardware for the Raptor 2s? The delivered engines don't seem to have anything like that and weren't labeled RB. I mean, I know some engines don't. I know some engines are not designed to gimbal, right? Like the outer ring is designed to just be static engines, and then the inner ones are the ones that will gimbal and move around to provide that support for the vehicle as it's launching and then as it's coming back to the catch tower. But here's my answer. Just because the delivered Raptor 2s weren't necessarily labeled RB doesn't. It might just mean they changed the labeling on them. because we definitely know that that some of the engines have to gimbal and some of them do not. So I'm not sure exactly what to read into that, but my first thing would be to say it might just be a labeling difference on how the on how what they're calling the various Raptors as they're being delivered.
Yeah, we didn't even get any funny memes on these, did we? we used to get funny.
Any what?
I know.
Memes, Chris.
I just
memes.
no. I just desperately wanted to get that in because I know people go in chat go crazy when I say it that way.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah,
I love it.
it was my excuse. That's all. I know it's memes.
Drive engagement through controversy is what you're doing.
Chris has renamed memes to memes.
Do love it. Yeah, seeing some more questions coming in about the can crusher and where if the boosters are headed for that. Distinct possibility that booster 4 definitely is. And then we'll see what happens. I mean, booster 7 right now is honestly the candidate with ship 24 to be the first flight test articles. So I wouldn't necessarily say booster 7 is destined for the can crusher, because if it flies, the sort of last plan we heard for the first orbital flight was that they would end up ditching the booster into the Gulf of Mexico, but have it fly the return profile as if it were coming back to the catch tower and as if it were actually going to be caught. That way they can see how the systems are working without endangering a very critical catch and stacking tower at Starbase. So that's sort of the plan for booster 7 right now, if it's the one to fly and if SpaceX doesn't change the first orbital flight plan from that. I also loved on the previous image, of course you just flipped away from it, that it looked like one of the grid fins was waving, like, hello!
Oh my gosh.
On booster 4 over there.
That's the sort of nonsense I come out with.
Exactly. Which is good, right? I love it. I love humor. Hello. I love when you can give rockets personalities.
You know, actually, they stuck the grid fins in the eyes.
That got dark quite fast.
Like the eyes on the close-up view are literally the holes that the grid fins are mounted into. Like, so when you're seeing the cute waving grid fin, it's actually stuck in the booster's eye.
Which
all right,
is awesome.
so I should have done that.
Kill the stream, didn't it?
No.
Right.
Sorry.
Bye, everyone. Thanks, everyone.
Good night, everyone. That's the show. Thanks for watching.
Here's a good question. Isn't it simpler to test in-flight behavior of Raptor 2s with a suborbital test flight rather than trying with a full stack? Interesting. That's a good question. So this is sort of what makes it interesting to me is there's obviously huge evolutionary design changes between Raptor 1 and Raptor 2. But what we saw with Raptor 1 is sort of what you're talking about here, right? Using a simpler in-flight test by only going suborbital on the ships to sort of understand how the engines are operating overall. I'm just going to call it the block upgrade because that's what I'm more used to. The block upgrade from Raptor 1 to Raptor 2, Elon has talked about how that was simplifying the overall design of the engine, making it more robust in terms of being able to fire repeatedly, very rapidly in sequence like it will need to do for the flight, just for the flight timelines that these vehicles are targeting. But in terms of like the vibrations, the acoustics, how the engines are actually interacting with the structure of the ship in their Raptor 2 version Raptor 1, I would be shocked from an engineering standpoint if those two things were radically different from one another. I think the design evolution changes that we've seen are about the performance increases, the thrust increases, which do have effects, but maybe not to the point where they're going to want to go suborbital because they probably think they have enough of that data confirmed through the suborbital flights of Starship in 2020 and 2021 to sort of bring that forward to Raptor 2 and then use some of the static fires to validate the computer models of what the computer models are showing you. So in this case, might just they might just say we've got what we need, so let's do full stack. That's the next step. But great question. Great question. Let me look here. So here's a good one. If Booster 7 is headed to the pad, what is the plan for Booster 5? Booster 5 is a nice thing to look at this point.
Yeah.
Pretty much as our Ship 21 and as well, because Ship 24 is the new one that paired with Booster 7 is the flight hardware that we are thinking of. But you can see 15, 16, and 21 there, all in a row, as well as Booster 5 hanging out in what we are now calling the Rocket Garden or the Starship Remembrance Area, I have also heard it called.
I think it's 22 that's also out there now, isn't it? I think it's...
it's 22 out there with them
15,
too.
16, Booster 5, and Ship 22, I think. Chat, correct me.
Nice.
It's one of them after 20.
It's 22.
22, yes.
There we go.
So 15, 16, and 22 that you can see there along with Booster 5. But they're obsolete at this point in the design iteration. So enjoy them. They are symbols of how quickly this program is moving.
Coming to a local airport near you.
Yes. Yes.
Nice. What do y'all think about that, real quick? Like, Elon was like, "Oh, we'll send you a Starship to the airport," and the airport's like, "Okay, we have room," and then like a flap on a pole shows up.
Well, I would say this. In the past, when SpaceX has offered hardware, it might take a while to get there, but it gets there. They had originally offered the visitor center here at Kennedy, one of the very early recovered Falcon 9s. And it took a while to get the booster there, but they have a whole about to open exhibit that is based around it now. So it would definitely be a weird thing to see at the Brownsville airport, considering it would by far maybe be bigger than the tower that they have there.
It's gonna need an FAA review before they can put it at the airport.
Yeah, I also want to see the traffic planning for how in the world you are going to drag one of those things through the streets to get it there. But
I don't think you can actually. Remember,
I don't
Falcon
think you
9
can either.
is designed to be transported on roadways. Like the design of Falcon 9 allows them to put them on a truck and move them around.
So
they do it all the time.
Because how you would have to do this is you would have to work with the city and the local power companies, because you would literally have to be disconnecting power lines, reconnecting them behind, taking down traffic lights, taking down traffic poles and everything like that. Like they did it when they dragged Endeavour through Los Angeles.
Yeah, I was going to mention that.
Oh yeah. but man, it's hard to drag a rocket that isn't designed for ground transport through the streets.
Yeah.
Not really impossible, but it's hard. Yeah.
Oh, another good point from chat here. Jimmy Wright said ship wouldn't meet safety regulations because they would need to pressurize it.
Oh yeah.
For structural stability. We know that they keep them pressurized even over in the garden, especially when the winds kick up. So if you were to install one, would you have to reinforce it at the airport or keep it pressurized all the time? That doesn't seem like something they would do with the pressurization. Interesting.
Good point.
Yeah, good
all these
point.
things are solvable. Like they can solve it. And if Elon wanted to write a check to get it done, I'm sure Brownsville would want to get it done, right? Like it's not insurmountable problems. It's just going to come down to was it a tweet or is it something where Elon is like, no, we're actually going to get this done. I know we have to take down 15 traffic lights on the way, but we can do it. Like I will be very interested to see if it ever ends up over there at the airport.
Same.
In the meantime, we got the flap. The quilted flap.
The quilted flap.
I do not think they're going to fly it there.
Here's another good question. How likely is it that Booster 7 and Ship 24 will already be outdated by the time they fly?
Oh, jeez.
Oh, that's a good question. They might be outdated now, to be fair, with how the design keeps iterating. No, so some of the design changes do make Booster 7 and Ship 24 more in line with the with the prototypes that will continue to follow them. In terms of number of engines, the type of Raptor engines they'll use, we see the exterior booster design evolution here on Booster 7 with the chines. So, I mean, how likely is it, based on how quickly SpaceX moves through the design process, that they will be outdated by the time they fly? I think the answer is they almost certainly will be outdated by the time they fly. But that doesn't mean, oh, everything about them is going to change. What I mean by that is, like, they might have already gone, oh, okay, well, we can do the chines differently on here. Or, oh, we've got a different thermal protection system tile application process on this one. Or, oh, we're going to tweak this little internal thing here. There might be those elements, but, you know, aside from a major design change, we'd have to wait for Elon. Because, you know, we know the header tanks are moving positions, but those are already sort of accounted for in how things are evolving here. So yeah, some things will be out of date by the time these fly, but a lot will probably still be in the iterations that will carry forward. I hope that makes sense, because that is a good question, but it's not a pure yes or no answer to that.
Yeah. And hey, real quick, we can see on the screen here, there are some of those aerial work platforms going up, and we may shortly see that big 100-meter op go all the way up to the top of the booster and attach those lift points. So you can see that on the very left-hand side of the screen, see that sort of the structure that's got the basket down near to the ground. It sort of looks like a robotic arm. We saw some people walking around there, and that thing has been unfolding. So I'm wondering if we're not going to see that thing go aerial, and they start to attach the booster to the crane.
Indeed.
I think this is quite fitting after all the delays of waiting for this booster. Well, I say all these delays, it's been days, let's face it, for Booster 7 to actually roll out. Once they did it, speed. Didn't hang about at all. Yeah.
Exactly. Here's a good question from Matt, though. Could the lack of gimbal hardware on the Raptor 2 mean they have moved the gimbal equipment into ship and booster instead and taken it off the engine? Never say never. I mean, the gimbal thing, I mean, the gimbal arms would have to connect to something within Starship to be pneumatic, you know, to be moved and to be commanded. So why that arm couldn't be a permanent part of the ship and not on the engine, I don't think there's a reason why it couldn't. That's a very good part. It could just be easier to. They could have decided that it was easier and more efficient to put those in the booster and the ship. We will have to see. It's also possible they were just delivered without them, and they will be installed here at Starbase. We have also seen things like that, where things are not always delivered in complete flight configuration and do need some work once they arrive. So, but good point.
Look at this, the people on the crane, and I'll look at the quick disconnect area. So they are really moving forward with this.
We're going to see how quickly they can disconnect it.
Well,
most of the time they go to disconnect that thing, they're out there wailing on it with a sledgehammer for 4 hours, trying to get it disconnected. So we haven't actually seen the quick disconnect move very quickly. It'll be interesting to see if they've made some design improvements here that lessen the percussive maintenance they have to, or percussive persuasion they have to use to get those things disconnected. I do think there is another space thing going on this morning, and I think, Chris B., you may need to step away for a minute, don't you?
Yeah, I've got to watch some rich people go suborbital for a bit.
Yeah, Blue Origin is aiming for their fourth crew flight this morning. Suborbital, New Shepard, but basically the other side of Texas from where our cameras are right now is where Blue Origin is seeking to do that this morning.
Yeah, I actually had a media inquiry from a national paper over here asking when Jeff Bezos went on his trip, how long will he be going around the moon?
Oh.
I said, you're in for a bit of a surprise there. It's suborbital. It's not even going to space properly.
How long are you already around the moon? Like,
oh dear. So, journalism standards are doing very well in mass media, I can see. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I got to do that. But I will back. And remember, 2 p.m. Central
yeah.
Time, Raptorside chat.
Good deal.
Be there for an hour of fun and me steering a camera.
Of Chris staring at camera. Folks, Chris Bergen here is going to hop off, but Chris, thank you so much for joining us this morning for the rollout of Booster 7. Have fun watching the hop to space.
My pleasure. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yeah, indeed.
All
But meanwhile,
right.
we are going to stay here and keep our focus on Booster 7 for the time being.
Yeah.
Hey, Das, I got a question for you here.
Uh-oh.
Oh, it's a good one. It's a good one. It comes from Peter Ford, and he was asking, looking back, when did you all first take the ITS/Starship idea seriously, and why?
Oh, geez.
I have my answer to that.
Okay. Do you want me to tell my answer?
Sure.
Like, actually, seriously, I started to take it seriously when they stopped welding it in a field. Right? Because the original things, it's like, here's a tent, and we're just going to slap some stuff together here on the beach, and is that a water tower or not? And it was all very questionable, but once they started building the infrastructure, they don't need clean rooms, right? But once they started building the windbreaks and the high bays and that sort of thing, and that sort of physical infrastructure started to come together, that's when I started to take it seriously, much more so than Hopper in a field welded together under a tent. When you see that sort of investment in the area, that's when I thought that the Starship program was something that was serious. Back in the PowerPoint days, at the presentation where that guy had the van that he wanted Elon to see and that sort of thing, ITS was sort of like, all right, ITS, but now next year it's BFR, and then now next year it's changed, and now next year it's changed. I was never really taking it too seriously then, but seeing the physical buildings, the permanent infrastructure starting to be put together at Starbase, that was the sort of stake in the ground. You know what I mean? For me. Is chat chewing me out? No, we're good. All right, cool.
I don't think they're chewing you out. No,
Yeah.
not at all. Yeah, I don't think I actually was aware of like the moment when I went from, oh, that's a cool idea, interested to see if it works, to, oh wow, like this is happening. I don't know, honestly. I mean, my answer to that, because I knew I had the answer, because my answer was really, I don't really remember when that transition happened for me. It was not the first two moments, but I think it was actually back in, I think this was 2018, the iteration of it where it looked like the Planet Express ship from Futurama. When it still had the non-deployable landing legs that stuck out like fins and stuff like that, I'm pretty sure that was the presentation where there was enough technical detail on the progress of what they were making, even though we hadn't gotten to your point yet, Das. I think that was the moment where I was like, oh, okay, like they're serious about this. Yeah, I think that's my answer to that, to be totally fair.
Cool.
Yeah.
And now, of course, I mean, look at the launch tower and everything out there. Like this is so far beyond welding in a field. This is an actual launch site. I hope that it gets its stamp of approval as a launch site, because it is getting closer and closer to actually being a potentially operational, ready-to-go launch site. Not quite there yet, but things are definitely continuing to progress forward. Oh, there goes the lift as well. Look, the big aerial work platform on the left
there goes, yep.
3 folks on it, it looks like, going up to attach those booster lift points.
And here's a nice message from John that just says, no question, just happy birthday, NSF, and thanks for all that you guys do. Thank you very much. Yes, it was around this time that that NSF was born 17 years ago. So yes, thank you for that acknowledgement.
Yeah,
Really appreciate
very cool.
it. Paul, I'm so sorry I missed this. Paul with a $50 super chat was asking, do you think they'll use the chopsticks to lift the booster or rely on the crane? Well, unfortunately, I think you asked this question and it has now become obvious that it is the crane. But I think this is a good point. because the booster is not expected to go onto the orbital launch mount right now, right? It's expected to go onto a different test stand out there. The chopsticks are not oriented to access that site. So the crane is being used here in that regard. So yeah, we are not going to see the chopsticks in action here today for this one because of the pad that is going on for its testing. Looking through some things. Oh, here's a good question. How many launches do you think it will take SpaceX to get to orbit? Is SpaceX now aiming for this success on the first one with Booster 7, even if it takes more time? So yeah, the current plan is that Booster 7 is the leading candidate for the booster to do the first orbital test. Of course, it has a lot of ground testing that it needs to go through by itself.
And make it through.
To make it through, to even be considered viable for the flight test here. But how many launches do you actually think it will take? This is very interesting because it is very hard and statistically, there are only 3 rockets in history that made it to orbit on their first attempt that did not utilize significant heritage hardware from previous vehicles. The shuttle, the Proton, and I always blank on the last one. The shuttle, the Proton, and one other rocket in history did it successfully on their first attempts. So that said, the odds are actually more in favor that you wouldn't have a complete success to orbit. Just because Starship, even though it kind of looks like the Falcon 9 to some degree in terms of how the booster comes back and lands and it's got a lot of engines, the Raptors are not heritage from Merlin. The propellant systems are completely new. What they're trying to do with the system is completely new. SpaceX does have a good track record of getting to orbit, but this is new, so it might take a couple of times. And that is a good thing to remember here, that we are so used to SpaceX making everything look easy. They might not succeed on the first attempt in getting to orbit. And you know what? Historically, that's perfectly in line with almost every other system that has ever been developed.
Especially something of this scale as well. I mean,
yes. Oh gosh.
Other smaller systems, like significantly, almost an order of magnitude smaller systems, haven't made it to orbit on the first try. Much less something this big, this complex, 33 engines, yada yada yada, like the whole shooting match.
Oh, indeed, and we also need to step back and say too that when this iteration of the vehicle flies with 33 Raptor 2 engines on the booster, the current world record for most number of engines that lit and the rocket left the pad was 31 with the Soviet N1 moon rocket. But the N1 never succeeded in making it to orbit on its 4 flights. So the actual world record for most number of engines that have succeeded in getting a vehicle to orbit is the Falcon Heavy with 27. So, there's a lot of complexity here. And while we do know that Starship is designed with engine out capability, meaning you can lose a few engines on your way up and the system can still get itself to orbit, we don't know exactly what those engine out capability is in terms of how many engines you could lose at what phase of the flight. But also we also don't know that if Raptors are because Raptors are still very much in development. If one lets go and it's very close to another one, that could potentially lead to a cascading issue. So, I mean, there are things that they need to work out. So it wouldn't be surprising if the first one didn't make it, to be fair.
Yeah. And again, this, a lot of people like to toss around, oh, the engine out, it's got engines, it's got engine out capability. Remember, it depends on how the engine goes out.
Yes.
It's very important exactly how that engine goes out, because there's not a lot of room in between the engines, and it is quite possible for an engine to go out in such a way that it convinces some other engines that they shouldn't be working either.
Exactly. I like the way you phrased that, yes.
You like that? Yeah.
I do, yes, indeed. Here's another interesting question relating to the overall system, saying Starship for a 1 hour-ish turnaround. Is that to enable point-to-point rather than Moon and Mars flights? Both is the answer to that. In reality, the rapid cadence is meant both for the moon and Mars flights in terms of because tanker starships going up for orbital refueling will need to be launching very rapidly, right? You would want to launch those very rapidly to minimize the on-orbit boil-off of your propellant that you're trying to transfer.
Yeah.
Even though methane and oxygen, I mean, they do boil off, but not as much as hydrogen. So using methane and oxygen really does work to the advantage of lowering the boil off rate, what is lost to evaporation. That's what boil off means. So it will aid point. Is that a person standing on top of the booster?
Suddenly there's a person up there standing on the top of the booster.
Oh my god, that needs to be a motivational poster now with something hilarious written on it.
Wait,
there's the other guy coming up. Look.
Yeah. So, chat, help us out. What would the motivational poster say? Like, if this were a motivational poster with the person, the worker standing on the very top of the booster, what would your motivational poster say?
Oh man, that's awesome.
I don't know what mine would say, Chris. I just
I don't know either. Like I'm still too. That was way too humorous. I was not expecting that visual. That's awesome. Oh man. But yeah. Anyway. Yeah. So yeah. Rapid turnaround is for the entirety of the system, not just point to point. Great question there. Stefan says it's called New Stack, Booster 7, and Man 1. But yeah, you can kind of see the crane. So the workers are probably up there getting ready to attach the load spreader to the top there for the eventual lift operations here for Booster 7. If you have just joined us, Booster 7 has rolled out to the orbital launch site this morning at Starbase. It was a gorgeous rollout that started in darkness, and we got a wonderful sunrise and even sunspots on our cameras. And now we are seeing Booster 4 at the pad and teams getting ready to hook it up to the load spreader so that it can be lifted onto its test stand. Quite a testing milestone for Booster 4 here coming up. They're going to do the thrust structure, right? The thrust puck is what it's called, to simulate the thrust that the section and the booster would have to absorb and handle for 33 Raptor 2 engines firing at the same time, both during static fire and flight operations. So lots of testing here with this booster, and of course this booster also debuting new design changes to the internal plumbing, as well as some of its outer surfaces. You can't quite see it in this angle, but the booster has chines now, which is a change from Booster 4. And you can also see here the two little holes at the top that look like eyes for a surprise booster are where the grid fins would normally mount. But there are no grid fins on this booster because the grid fins are not needed for this current test campaign. So that is sort of where we stand right now. And David, thank you so much for becoming a member of Red Team. Thank you so much for checking out the our membership program, where there are lots of perks and a very nice community of people who are all interacting, loving this stuff. So if you haven't checked out our membership and want to, go ahead and look at some of the perks that we offer there, including some Discord access, early access to videos and photos from daily and for specific events, and all sorts of good membership perks up there if you are so inclined.
Yeah, it's another really cool way to support what we do. I mean, I hope that people understand that we have a lot of cameras out there. We use a lot of bandwidth to bring you all this stuff. Starbase Live is up 24/7, so you can always check out on what's going on, even if we're not here doing a commentated stream like this one. But the membership program and the monthly support that y'all give us is one of the reasons I can go to Chris and say, Chris, we need another camera. And he's like, okay. How many cameras are you buying this time, Das?
Oh yeah, and see, that is the next question. How many?
Well, I'll get back to you later. I'll send you a budget.
Okay, there we go. It
depends on how many super chats we get this stream. I'll have to see. Let's see. We'll run the numbers for this stream. Let's see how many more cameras I can buy.
Indeed. Speaking of some of that, and I see some questions still rolling in. Again, if you have questions, do tag them in chat. Yes, Blue Origin is in a hold and is going to be launching here soon. We are definitely aware of that, that launch taking place from West Texas. We are in East Texas, Southeast Texas right now, live here for this particular lift for Starship. Well, actually, rollout, and now it looks like the booster is being prepared to be lifted onto its test stand. That was a better and more accurate way to say that.
Sort of South Texas here. Like, this is about as south as Texas goes.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, my phone always thinks I have crossed the border into Mexico when I am down there. So yes.
One of our cameras is like 100-something meters from Mexico. Like, it's just right there across the river. So we are about as far south as you can get in Texas.
Indeed. And do we have that close-up shot of the top of the booster again really quick? Because we have a question that's specifically related to it.
There you go.
Perfect. So the question is sort of, what is the white object at the top of the booster between the grid fin openings? That is the pin where the tower arms would either catch it or lift it for stacking. That is what that is. So good eye. Good eye catching that. That is the little point where the catch arms would interface with the booster.
Or the nose.
Or the nose, yes. Yes.
Until they see grid fins in its eyes.
Exactly.
It almost looks like a puppy.
It does.
Like, the little black thing on the side looks like an ear now.
It kind of does, doesn't it? It's definitely an expressive face this morning on the booster. But yes, if you do have questions, keep tagging us at NASASpaceflight in chat. We will. We are looking through that. We are trying to take some questions from there. We can never get to any question, but we do try our best. So please keep asking, even if you think it might have been asked earlier, and you're worried that, oh, I don't want to re-ask a question. No, re-ask it. Like, this stream is already going on 2 hours. I guarantee you, people are here who did not hear the answer to that before. So don't be shy. But look at what they're doing here.
Okay, are they able to attach this without bringing the lift around to this side?
That is exactly what it looks like. They are literally just using arm power to get the cable, to get the lift cable around.
The load straps. Yeah.
Load straps, thank you. I almost said straps, and then I second-guessed myself, so thank you.
Yeah, no.
That looks like what they're doing.
Yeah, he signaled the crane operator, and the crane operator actually moved the load spreader over a little bit to give him some slack, and then just sort of wiggled it, looped it around.
Yeah.
Like moving the water hose in the yard. I don't know. Has anybody ever done that where you, like...
Oh, yes.
You whip the water hose, and it goes... It's like wave function going down the water hose.
Oh, yes. Many times.
Not some sort of, like, securing mechanism or something, like a little safety strap that goes across the top of it or something. I guess there doesn't need to be. It's not like the booster's going to hit a bump and jump off the straps or anything. Huh.
Interesting.
That would certainly be a faster way to hook a booster up if need be, right?
Yes, it is. Okay, okay. First, to everyone who is contributing to the DOS camera fund, thank you so much. There's like 5 super chats came in with like emojis of cameras. My contribution to the DOS camera, I'm gonna go with fund. But here's the one I really laughed at and really liked. We need a render of Human 1 for aerodynamic load analysis.
I'm not sure the booster is aerodynamically stable in that configuration.
But how does the human change the aerodynamic?
Not much.
Not much. But DOS, look at this. Look at this image real quick that we've got on screen. So if you come down from where they're hooking the load strap onto the connection pin, if you come down to the first barrel section that doesn't have those vertical stringer bars,
stringers.
Yeah, if you come down to the first barrel section, we see openings on either side.
Yep.
Those are the vents, right? The like sort of how they plan to use the propellant tank vents as the reaction control system.
Yep.
For the boosters to control it. Those are the vents for that. Yeah.
You got it. That's when the screaming banshee lets loose when they pressure trash these things. Those are some of the vents that open up, and we see venting from every direction, like high pressure venting, very fast venting, very forceful venting. We've seen it on the orbital launch mount as they were doing some of those cryo and fuel prop tests.
Yeah, and this is one of those changes that we can see very clearly now that Elon was talking about, where the question sort of came up: how will the booster control themselves when they're up in the thin upper levels of the atmosphere, where you can't use aerodynamic surfaces to flip the booster around? Like when it separates from Starship at 70, 80 kilometers in altitude, there's not enough air pressure up there to use aero surfaces. So you've got to have some other propulsive way of flipping your vehicles around and orienting them until they're back in the dense lower atmosphere. And thrusters are a way to do that. The Falcon 9 uses separate cold gas thrusters, but this is sort of built into the tanks themselves. So they just open the valve and you vent a little bit of gaseous oxygen that's boiled off, and that produces enough of a propulsive force to flip your vehicle around and orient it. So those are some of those ports that we can see now very clearly here on Booster 7.
Yeah.
That
is, I'm curious as if the aerial work platform, AWP aerial work platform is the big lift that takes the workers up to the top, right? I'm curious if that's going to come around to this side and look at this point, or do they just need to get on top of the booster and sort of lean over the top and wrangle it in a position? I'm very curious if that's enough. There's that big work platform. You can see it lifted all the way up, 100-meter work platform to get to the top of the booster there. Almost at full extension. Not at full extension, but that thing is almost up as high as it goes.
Well, because I was going to say, right, I mean, like, yeah, that booster is tall by itself. Just the booster itself is roughly the height of a fully stacked Falcon 9 on the launch pad. And that's just stage 1.
The scale is so tough. Like, the scale of it is so tough.
It really is. Really, really is.
Count the people in the... Wait. Are they crawling out the hole?
They are.
Oh, my gosh. They're crawling out the grid fin hole to get into the aerial work platform. There you go. The third worker just crawled out the hole. And now I imagine that the op is going to move around some. It went up with 3 people, didn't it?
I don't think I keyed into how many people were on it when it went up. Yeah,
Chad,
but
I think it was 3. Chat, help us out here. Like, I'm pretty sure it was 3, but we talk a lot. Sometimes we don't watch what happens on the screen.
Okay, David. I like David's idea for the motivational poster. One small step for a man, one giant booster for mankind.
Nice.
Love it, David.
Chad also picked up on the fact that we were like little worms crawling out the eye of the booster.
I like that.
Little human parasites crawling out the eye. Don't Google that. So there's the work platform. Are they going to go check out the other side, maybe?
Or go pick up the other crew?
No. I think it went up with 3. Yeah, a bunch of people were saying 3, so maybe they're just looking at it. The guy either has a whistle or a radio. It's probably like a boom microphone, like a headset. It's a little crazy that we can see the guy's boom microphone from the ground up there.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, you can on the other side of his face.
Yeah.
And actually, there are a lot of questions coming in about the grid fins in particular, since we just mentioned them again. And this is sort of a question from LMAO, and it's sort of a summary question of what everyone is asking. Basically, do we think they could take the grid fins from 4 and put them on 7? Nothing that we have been told about the evolutionary design changes from 4 to 7, Booster 4 to Booster 7, makes me believe that they couldn't take that. The grid fins are like custom made. We know on the Falcon 9 the grid fins can be moved around from booster to booster. It would make perfect sense that is what they're going for with Starship as well.
Yeah.
Again, they're not needed for the types of tests that are going on right now at the pad for Booster 7, but the way this sort of factors into the questions that everyone else is asking is basically, how interchangeable are the grid fins? And the answer to that is we have no information that they are not interchangeable between the various boosters. So that could be something to look for. Would they take the grid fins off of 4 and save them for 7? Because those grid fins are expensive, and if they were working properly on Booster 4 when they tested them, SpaceX doesn't like to throw out things that they can still reuse. So, yeah, it's a good question. Definitely a good question there.
That is a good question. It'll be interesting to see what happens there. Maybe that's what we're going to see. Like, maybe we're going to see a Booster 4 roll back, and then they take some parts off of it, and then the grid fins get set aside, and they put them on Booster 7. Who knows? That is a good question.
Indeed. Blue Fusion, thanks so much, saying, I love the stream, been watching since Starhopper, really love your intro too. Yeah, I like our intro song too. For what we use, I do not unfortunately know the name of it. Jack knows it, but I do not know the name of it off the top of my head.
There's a chat command for it, actually. I think the mods have a chat command for it.
Oh, okay. Well, well then look at chat. We might be able to get you this answer very quickly with the command.
I hope I'm not lying there. I know I've seen links to it in chat before, and I know that one of the mods posted it before, but I don't remember if it was command or not.
You gotcha.
If you want to listen to the song, just watch our videos. Good grief. Just go to YouTube and keep watching our videos over and over again.
Do. Right? Something like that.
I'm trying to get some more views here, Chris. They pay the bills.
Indeed. Wolfram saying they don't need RCS to flip the booster, just have the Kerbals run from one end to the other very quickly. Easy. I love that. It works in Kerbal Space Program. And all of that. Jason saying that I suspect the chopsticks have not been rated for 200 plus tons by those water bags. What do you think? Is this a reference into, like, we've only seen it lift the ship so far?
Yeah, we saw the big water bag testing. Remember those big load test water bags that they would fill with water? And judging by the size of the bags and how filled up we got, we know that they got moved to certain weights were tested, right? But I think the bags that we've seen have been at least equivalent to the mass of a booster. Wasn't there some discussion as to whether or not a ship would be heavier than certain configurations of a booster and that sort of thing? I think so. I don't know that the reason is that they haven't been certified yet. Like, SpaceX doesn't post a sign on the side of the road that says the chopsticks are now certified. Like an elevator. It doesn't work like an elevator where you have to clearly post that it's ready to go. But I know that they have filled up those 100-ton bags, and they had multiple bags on at the same time, and they did lifts all the way up and down. And I don't know that we could say that it's the fault of the chopsticks haven't been able to lift the massive booster yet. I don't think we have any evidence that points to that.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, so it's related to the Artemis program, this question. London was wondering, any comment on Jeff Bezos's trying to bid on the Artemis mission lunar lander contract again, even after already losing to SpaceX? This is a good question, because this is sort of the thing that a lot of we definitely mentioned it. This got overlooked a lot when the initial SpaceX award for the lunar lander came out. That contract was only for the Artemis 3 flight. And NASA was very upfront about that was not the contract for everything going forward. Obviously, the company or companies who would have won that contract, which SpaceX was the only one who did, are in prime position to keep going after that, right? Because you already have everything there. But NASA was very clear that they didn't consider that to be the end-all be-all, that there would be another competition for another lander so that there would be redundancy, so that there would be options going back and forth as the program sort of continues to evolve. What Blue Origin got upset with is that they did not win the first contract, and that NASA had originally said they wanted to pick 2, and then it only ended up picking one, although based on the way they wrote the contract, that was always a legal possibility that NASA could only choose one of the ones that were offered to them. They also could have chosen none and redone the process completely.
And they didn't really have enough money for more than one either.
And that was it. They
Yeah.
didn't end up having enough money for more than one because of budget cuts from Congress. And to be totally fair, Starship came in at 2 point something for in its price point, and Blue Origin was next in the 6. So it was a 3-fold price increase between what SpaceX bid and what Blue Origin bid. Now, there were also elements of Blue Origin's bid that NASA did not find were far enough along to warrant more consideration for that particular one. But the important part is they always said there would be another one for the flights after Artemis 3. And that is what we saw the announcement for a couple of weeks ago of NASA coming, or last week, of NASA coming out and saying, here it is. Here is the other contract we talked about for additional landers, but they're additional landers not for Artemis 3, but the follow-on missions. So nothing with the new contract request and process that was initiated last week by NASA will affect Artemis 3. That one's done. That one's SpaceX. It's going to be Starship. If you don't like that, I'm sorry. That's just going to be the reality. Beyond Artemis 3 is when we might start having more than one and have options of which organization, which lander are we going to use. So in that regard, all for it, Blue Origin, go for it. I mean, submit your proposal. I really, truly hope you win it. I want more than one lunar lander. I want more than one company doing this. And that's what I would say. I think it's wonderful that they are going to try again. Exactly what the national team looks like, though, is a bit different because Northrop Grumman was originally part of that national team. But yesterday on a conference call with reporters about the Artemis program, they actually said that they're looking at a design on their own and they might not rejoin the national team.
Yeah.
So what the Blue Origin lander now looks like is a far more fascinating question to me, but I very much want to see Blue Origin and other companies too. I would love to see Dynetics back. I would love to see Northrop Grumman have their own. I would love to see what Lockheed and Boeing might come up with as well. The more options, and Lockheed is technically part of the national team, but the more options we have, the better. So everyone apply who can, and it can legitimately can, is what I would say.
I agree.
Yeah. Sorry, that was longer than I had intended.
I have
there we
nothing
go.
to add.
Yeah. Okay,
If there's
Das.
one- Yeah, no,
go
if
ahead.
there's one thing, you come to the NASA Spaceflight streams and you ask a question, expect to get an answer. If it's one of the questions that we can actually get to, we can't get to all the questions. We try, but that is the type of answer you could expect around here.
Indeed.
I like it. Yep.
But Das, here's what I'm going to throw to you.
Okay.
When launch?
When launch? Well, we do expect to see a crane-assisted takeoff here shortly.
Oh, you guessed the next question. Yes, I should have started with that. My apologies to the person who had Cato in there. I had it queued, I swear.
Oh, nice. What's the Cato one?
Oh, hang on. Let me. I have to search for it. I've got it. Okay, Cato. Will B7 achieve Cato before New Shepard launches in a few minutes? Because New Shepard is holding right now. I think New Shepard will beat it if it launches today, but that's my answer to that. Anyway, I had that queued, but yes, go for it, Das.
No, that's. I was just saying we're expecting a Cato here, but when's the launch? I think we're still months away from any sort of launch. So
Yeah.
we shall see.
Yeah, because all the regulatory processes are nowhere near done. So it will definitely be a while for Starship for when launch. And to be fair, we can also still be asking when launch for SLS because it needs to get through its wet dress rehearsal before we'll have a target date for it as well this summer. So a whole bunch of stay tunes for the launch date is basically the answer.
Yeah.
Here's an interesting question. Can SpaceX use heat shield tiles on the fuel farm depot to insulate it? Not really. The thermal protection system will provide some degree of that for the propellants that are in Starship, especially in terms of propellant management once it's in orbit. But but they're not made to be like they're made to absorb the heat or radiate it away from the vehicle. They're not meant to do I can keep this cold for, 24 hours or hot. That's not really what that heat shield is trying to do. So it does have a positive effect, but not a huge effect. So the best way to actually insulate propellant farm tanks is to sort of you have the inner tank, and then you have an outer shell that goes around it, and you usually have like liquid nitrogen or some form of inert cold gas in there, or airflow, depending on what your commodity is, to keep it cold like that and to keep it liquid. That's how you would do it. But good question. I like that question. Das, here's another one. And this is a good one. It's not a technical one. It's an emotional one. What kind of feelings is the world going to have when we reach Mars compared to the Apollo program reaching the moon, in our opinion?
Oh.
I have my happy-go-lucky answer to that, and like how I would hope it would be, where I would hope even more people than gathered to watch that moon landing, that moment that brought the world together at the height of the Cold War in 1969, and just the hundreds of millions of people. I mean, the most watched broadcast of its time. It's been surpassed since then, but the most watched broadcast in the world at that time, where everyone stopped and watched a television or listened to a radio or tried to find information about it. Like, I would hope that's what it would be. I fear that we're so disconnected now, because of how connected technology has made us, that maybe most people will just see it as a notification on their phone. I hope not. I hope everyone would be watching this and reveling in the absolutely astonishing accomplishment that is going to be. I mean, the only species on the planet that is capable of doing that, and we can do it, and we can do it safely and get people there. Like, I really hope the feeling is an overwhelming sense of hope and positivity for the future. That's what I would hope.
Yeah, I agree, Chris. For me, I'm going to be like, it's about time.
Yeah.
Because it seems like something we should have done. We stalled out. We went to the moon, and we ended up on the moon, and we left some flags, and we left some boot prints, and then we just stalled out. And yeah, we built the space station, and we have the one space station going around. Now we have two space stations. We had other space stations, but it feels like we sort of hit this chasm, and we didn't go any further. In robotic exploration, all these other things that happened, reasons that it's not funded, all these things, it seems like we could have been with a base on the moon and all the way out to Mars a lot faster than we actually got around to it, for myriad reasons. And so for me, when I think about it, it's like, geez, it's about time. Finally, we needed to do this. We need to keep taking these steps forwards. We don't just need to sit back in our cradle and think that everything's cool. We need to keep pushing out. That's sort of what we do, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, it's sense of wonder. This is amazing. It's like, yeah, okay, about time. Humanity, way to get your act together. You need to do these things. You know what I mean? There's a lot of things we need to do that way. I mean, taking better care of our own planet. We need to do that too. We need exploration, taking care of people, like all the things. And it's when you get around to it, it's so many things. It just feels like finally, gosh,
yeah,
needed to do that. It's
exactly. And like I think from my perspective, like, this is the thing, like 10 years ago, right? If you would have asked me the question, will there be a human on Mars? Will there be humans living on Mars in my lifetime? And 10 years ago, I was in my early 20s.
Yep.
My honest answer 10 years ago would have been, well, I hope, but I'm not holding my breath. Because NASA's timeline for 40 years had been about 30, 40 years away.
Yep.
And that was always it. And I mean, as we sort of continue to push into the 2020 decade, I mean, my answer is like, oh yeah, we will, and probably within 10 years. Like, that's an incredible shift in terms of in terms of our technological readiness to do this. And obviously, Starship has a long way to go.
Yep.
I'm not looking at that with rose-colored glasses, but I mean, there's also no real reason right now to think it won't work.
Yeah.
It's just, will it work exactly the way they've envisioned it? And I think that's the overarching question that we still have that will inform how quickly we do the Mars trips and everything. It'll be interesting.
It
But
will.
yeah,
I think we've had the technological ability to do it for quite some time now. It's just that we haven't
yes.
had the will to do it. Political
We
will,
haven't had the
humanity
political will to do
Yeah,
it. Yeah.
exactly. And so it's not a technical problem. Technology's only gotten better. We've gotten more
Right.
capable. We've learned more. We've got so much experience living on the space station. We've got more robotic experience. We've got better computers. We've got better sensors. Like all the things that we have, it's not like the technology has regressed.
No.
It's gotten better. So I think it literally that's why I feel like it's like a geez about time sort of thing, because it's literally the will, the funding, somebody thinking that it's important enough to go out there and make it happen. And that's why we're all so in love with Starbase and in love with
Yeah.
Starship and Elon. It's like finally there's somebody out there that thinks this is important and has the will and the means to make it happen. And that's a bumpy road, right? There are some pitfalls to that and that sort of thing, but finally there's somebody who is out there sort of cracking the whip saying, hey, wake up, we need to do this. I'm going to make it happen. Hope
Indeed.
some other people, some other organizations, some other companies not only use Starship but also get a fire lit quite technically under themselves or their rocket boosters.
Yeah.
So that it's not just SpaceX. Like I really do hope that SpaceX not only inspires but shows that it's a market, shows that it's something that other companies can do, makes other things sort of pop up, because I don't ever want it to just be one or all of our eggs in one basket. I know I say that all the time. I'm sure Chad
Yeah.
hates it. But I hope that it doesn't just inspire people to think that we can go and do this, but it inspires other companies to continue to increase our capabilities.
Yeah, and, I'll touch really quick on what is also happening on the opposite side of the state of Texas this morning, and what we're still waiting for with the Blue Origin suborbital flight. But the same for that element of how space exploration and space travel is changing, right? Like I don't just want one suborbital provider, right? We need more, and we need more than just the two that are doing it right now.
Yep.
We need more of that. And I know that's kind of controversial in our industry, but we saw how a suborbital flight affected William Shatner of all people.
Yep.
The more people who can experience that, the better, to me. So,
Yeah. And
anyway,
you even look like Blue Origin's doing their thing right now, and you look at the way that booster comes down and lands. I don't even care that it's not an orbital class booster. Congratulations,
No.
that's great. When it comes down and it lands on the launch pad and it does that hover and the recenter, you think that technology and that capability and the engineers that made that can't use that for other things? Like that's a technological advance. It's not just about taking tourists to space. It's technology that we're using and gaining experience with.
And actually, to that point, NASA has actually had sensors and experiments on the Blue Origin boosters, on the New Shepard boosters as they come back, because they are perfect ways to test lunar landing technology, where you might have to get close enough to the surface for your radar systems to go, big rock, need to translate over 10 meters. You better be able to hover and translate over 10 meters.
Yep.
And how the New Shepard booster lands is perfect for that. So exactly what you said, the more companies we have, the more information we can gather on this to make all these things possible.
Yeah.
So-
The hover slam is fantastic when you have a nice prepared space at a known location to land on. But if you're landing in unknown territory on the moon with rocks and boulders, and this, you look at it from orbit, satellites, photos, whatever, but you don't always have a nice drone ship or an LZ to land in. So it's not always the option to just come in and hover slam it down. So,
Indeed.
Anyways, good times.
Here's a good question for us here. So the Kennedy Space Center can't support launches closer than 2 days apart. How can future Starship launches do fast turnaround there? Okay, first off, Dawson, I need to ask a question. Has Elon ever said that Starship can only be supported 2 days apart from one another? Because I think I know what this question is looping to, but I want to make sure I haven't missed anything. Have we heard anything about launch constraints for Starship at Kennedy?
Starship?
I haven't. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think what this is actually asking or is in reference to is SLS for Artemis 1 needs at a minimum 48 hours between launch attempts. But that is a very specific Artemis 1 only issue because the amount of liquid hydrogen that they need for that rocket is enough for one full attempt. But the amount that you lose, the amount of liquid hydrogen you lose to boil off, basically means there isn't enough liquid hydrogen that's pumped back to the storage areas out of the rocket after a scrub to fully refuel the rocket and take it through its countdown, because that rocket is fully fueled for like 6 hours before liftoff, and just constantly being replenished with liquid hydrogen. So they have to refill the liquid hydrogen sphere at pad B between attempts. That takes and basically that refill process means that SLS has to have 48 hours between attempts. That is the only launch constraint I have ever heard out of Kennedy right now. Other than that, it would just come down to the propellant commodity, how much propellant they have at the pad for Starship, which they're going to scale that to be able to do multiple launches at the same, multiple attempts across multiple days. So I don't really see where Starship would run into that issue. And again, SLS after Artemis 1 will have a brand new liquid hydrogen storage sphere out there at the pad, and will also be able to attempt, on back-to-back days as well going forward. So I think that's where your question was stemming from. If I got that wrong, Bruce, please let me know if that was not what you were referencing.
Tweet at him. At @ChrisG_NSF.
Indeed. There we go.
Is
Exactly.
it easy? Yeah, is an easy way to get in touch, especially after the stream. Let me do this real quick. I want to run through some of the super chats that have been hanging out here. Sometimes there's questions, and so we don't always get too far into questions when we're talking about other things like activities that are happening on the stream. But Barry West, thank you so much for the support. Asking, with the R2s, with the Raptor 2s, will there be suborbital launches of Starships to test them? We heard about a potential thought about a hypersonic test flight for a Starship. Didn't hear anything else about that and haven't seen any sort of paperwork or rumblings about that, right, Chris?
Exactly, yes.
Yeah. So no real indication that that's a thing. Of course, it's something that they could pursue. Still, of course, waiting on the FAA assessment to see what comes back with the environmental stuff, but I don't know that they are even ready to launch. If the FAA came in tomorrow and said, hey, rubber stamp, boom, boom, go, they still wouldn't be launching tomorrow. They're months away from being able to launch. So it'll be interesting to see. I don't know if they have any plans like that, but a great question. Pampalak is 39A full thrust. I guess we were naming the other pad there, the 39A full thrust. Atlanta Space Shuttle says, Rocky Roads to asphalt, go SpaceX, go Sharpie. Love you, Chris B and G. And that was from the Atlanta Space Shuttle. So apparently that's a reciprocal affection there, Chris.
That would be Chris B's favorite orbiter, yes.
Oh, well, sorry, Atlantis. Chris G does not love you.
I didn't say that.
Let's see. Taylor Van Camp says, went to the Cape for vacation, got there the day of the last Starlink launch, and slept through all 3 of your alarms. But you got to see SLS and the booster come back. Would recommend everyone to go to the Cape. Taylor, that's fantastic that you were able to out there. Sorry you missed the launch. I know how that is, setting 15 alarms to make sure that you don't miss things. Especially, Chris, when you have to like show up for media badging or media escort like 5 hours before the launch sometimes.
Oh my gosh, that is correct.
Drive an hour and a half. Like, you really got to set alarms for that. But I'm glad you were able to see that. Thank you so much for the support. Chris Watt, Capcom member, the membership program, another cool way to support us. Hey, the merch store too, y'all. We've got the whole merch store thing where you can purchase shirts and tank watching merch, and there's a couch pillow if you're into that sort of thing. I think we have coffee mugs and stuff like that too. So thank you so much for all the different types of support. Quick question from Ceritus. Did we ever see an engine installed or removed on the booster on the orbital launch mount? Or was all the work done on the stands in suborbital launch mount?
Oh, that's a very good question. I don't personally have a memory of seeing an engine come out when it was on the launch mount.
Yeah, all the way up on the full table.
But they definitely did engine work when it was on the other stands out there. Yes.
Yeah. Huh. All right. I don't know that we've seen that. So a very good question. And again, this isn't going to the mount right now. This is actually going to the, I guess, the hydraulic test bed, whatever we're calling that thing these days. And I don't know that that even has room for them to work on engines, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, let's see here. Lunar depression. Oh, we just talked about that. Thank you for the support as well. We've got, yep, I got that one. I'm just making sure I didn't miss any here. PEBMETs. So here's one. Okay, Chris, one for you real quick. If Starship launches from 39A, or I guess we'll just say 39, would NASA have issues with the booster returning to the same pad to be caught? An anomaly could damage NASA assets on 39A, could risk 39B. I could say it could also impact our ability to launch crew from the Cape. How do you think that shakes out with NASA in dual use of 39A?
Well, that's going to be very interesting because, yeah, there's a tricky balance that we've got to do here, or that SpaceX really has to do here in terms of how do you manage your Falcon 9 human flights, your Falcon Heavy flights, and your Starship flights all off of one pad, especially with an increasing cadence for Falcon Heavy and for some of the crew missions. So, yeah, that will definitely be a consideration. In terms of what NASA chooses to do, I mean, to me, the actual interesting interplay is between Pad A and Pad B when you have SLS out there.
Right.
What is allowed to go off of Pad A? What isn't, because of, you have these things at Kennedy called the blast danger area, which is basically if something goes really wrong on the launch pad and goes boom, what is the radius that things could fall, right? And so I think that's more of the interplay that I'm interested in, these two massive vehicles on pads right next to each other. How are the pad operations between the two affected? And we obviously know that SLS can be out on the pad when a Falcon 9 launches, because that is what is planned for next week when Axiom lifts off.
Yep.
So we know Falcon 9s aren't necessarily an issue, but Starship's a whole nother animal with how much propellant it takes in that methane capacity there. So we'll have to see. Yeah.
It really is a strong argument that Boca is the right place to be doing this testing.
Yes, it is.
The Cape, okay, it has clearance, but it's a multi-user spaceport. There's other critical missions going on. United States crew launch happens from there. Other servicing launches happen from there to get supplies to the space station. You do risk, you not only have to schedule around those other things, right? SLS, Artemis launching from there. You have to schedule around all those other users, right? But you also have to worry about what happens if something goes wrong with a very early development or test program, because they haven't brought a booster back yet. They haven't launched a booster yet. They haven't brought one back. They haven't caught one with a tower. They haven't done any of those things. But it really is a strong argument to do that testing at Boca, where you're not risking other critical space infrastructure for something that is definitely going to have some road bumps, hiccups,
right?
Boosters exploding and crushing into the ground. Like, I imagine these things are going to happen because that's part of the development process. So,
wouldn't surprise me.
Anyways, so folks, we are not exactly sure when they're going to lift here. It does look like, well, we know that they lifted or they hooked it up to the crane. It does look like they are working around the base of it, but they could lift in 10 minutes or they could lift in 4 hours. We're not exactly sure. So what we're going to do here, we're actually going to go ahead and close down the commentary stream. But that doesn't mean that all the camera views are going to stop. Starbase Live is our 24/7 coverage out there at Starbase, and you can continue to watch here on the same NASA Spaceflight channel all the cameras. We have like a multi-camera thing set up where you don't have to go and watch 15 ads on 15 different channels just to see. We're not trying to like milk you for ad money or anything like that. But at the end of the commentary stream here, Starbase Live will stay up. You can watch all the cameras over there. We'll have Starbase Live operators. We have an entire team of people that switch cameras and watch for things that happen and zoom in here and make sure that when this lift occurs, whether it's in 10 minutes or 10 hours from now, it will be covered over there on the different stream, same channel. So if you don't know where that is, let's get some links to that in chat. It's literally just another stream right here on the channel. This view will stay up. This is one of our automated cameras for sure. We'll mix in some of those other mid-range and long-range cameras as well. But that is going to conclude our commentary stream here for the rollout of Booster 7 in preparation for its test campaign. Involved with the stream today, just really quickly, earlier we heard from Mr. Chris Bergen, the managing editor for NASA Spaceflight. He had to run off and make cheeky comments about other spaceflight activities that are happening. I mean, serious news coverage about other spaceflight activities that are happening. So massive thanks to Chris for stopping in. Chris Gebhardt was here as well, or still is.
I am,
tense
yes.
Here as well. Chris, thank you so much for joining us for the rollout today.
My pleasure. And yes, I am still in the present tense, yes.
Present tense. Chris Gebhardt is still here and is continuing to be here. Also out in the field, we had both Nick and Mary, Boca Chica Gal, the original Starbase photographer, out there with some fantastic views and also recording a ton of stuff that'll go in our daily edited video. Mary changed, but that's fine. Also, Nick and Sweeney is out there as well. So much stuff going on at Starbase. We've actually got 2 full-time people out there helping document what's going on, not only through the live streams and keeping all the robotic cameras running and stuff like that, but also the daily videos, the up-close and personal stuff from all over Starbase that we get to see. Hey, Patrick, thank you for operating the stream today. We had a new operator clicking on the buttons here.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Excellent. And also, I actually don't know if you have a card, Patrick. We'll have to sort that out. You can't display your own name on the screen. Yeah, sorry.
It's on my list to do.
All right. And then lastly, folks, I'm John Galloway for NASA Spaceflight. Thank you so much for joining us. And we will continue to watch on Starbase Live, our 24/7 coverage. Maybe we'll hop over there and chat to see what happens with Booster 7 here today. It's hooked up to that crane, and the way it's looking, they may be disconnecting it and moving it shortly. But thank you all so much for joining us here today. Hope you enjoyed the commentary. Hope to see you over on Starbase Live, and we will see you nerds later. Thanks for watching.
Propulsion continues to be nominal.
RCPT pressure looks good. Following up. Roger, roll, Atlantic.
Water towers fly! Yes!
Tango Delta nominal.
Flight down speed off. Bring in and speed off.
Yikes. You bet. Concur. We don't need any more of these.